Welcome to HP FanFiction. Support me by subscribing the channel. Also, like and share the video to keep me motivated to make more videos like these. The little elf popped into Harry's room at Greengrass Estate, where he was making deep inroads into getting his homework out of the way before the wedding. "Master Harry," said the little elf deferentially, getting Harry's attention. "Mistress Usse would like you to see her in the ladies' parlour." Harry nodded to the elf and said, "Thank you." He set aside what he was working on, his transfiguration assignment, and made his way along the floor to the ladies' parlour. He'd looked in there once before, when being given his initial tour of the estate. However, he was also told it was a room for the ladies of the estate, only and that he was not to enter unless specifically invited. This was the first time he had been. He knocked on the door and, hearing the invitation to enter, opened the door and walked in. In the center of the room were 3 long tables, even-spaced and parallel to one another. They were covered in brochures, swatches of material, photographs, and other paraphernalia. One end of the middle table had a white cloth covering what was under it. Isabel and Daphne were moving around them. Looking up, Isabel smiled at him, gestured and said, "Come in, Harry, you need to see this." Walking forward to stand beside her, Harry looked across the 3 tables and frowned. "What is all this?" he asked. "This is the planning for your wedding," explained Isabel, indicating the tables. Left to right, she said. "The first one is the planning for the arrangements that occur before the wedding. The middle is the wedding itself. The far right is the reception and honeymoon. On the last, you'll notice there's a great deal of the table that's, shall we say, blank." Harry did notice that area of the table is for your honeymoon, and for the arrangements of what happens after the honeymoon, such as where you'll be living, she explained. "That's mainly your task. You need to make a start on it. Soon. Very soon." "Oh," he said, "mainly I have it all in my head." "That may be fine for you, Harry," she said, "but Daphne at least needs to know what's going on there, so wardrobes and the like can be planned." Nodding in understanding, he said, "All right, I can understand that. I'll get it all down on paper for you. Anything else I need to be concerned with?" "Oh yes, dear boy, oh yes," she chuckled. Harry immediately had the distinct impression he was in for an experience similar to lady shopping. Isabel hustled him forward to the table on the left and started to explain things to him. But worse, she started asking his opinion of things, and she didn't give him any clues as to what answers she wanted. He was a guy for Merlin's sake. What did he know about colors such as watermelon, taupe, and chartreuse? He didn't even know they were colors. When she mentioned something about crushed velvet, he said he was sure the house elves could smooth it all out again. She looked so disappointed with him, it was maddening. When she showed him what he thought was a modern work of art in the form of some type of tapestry, she told him it was the schedule of the event. It was huge. Eventually, he was handed a stack of books and told to go read them. They were on subjects covering wedding ceremonies of the magical world, wedding breakfasts, types of wedding receptions, length of honeymoons, honeymoon destinations, how to invite guests, who should be considered guests, duties of the groom, duties of the groomsman, duties of the family of the groom, and a wealth of other subjects. He needed help, and he knew who he needed to see to get that help. It was time for a visit to the Black House, aka the kennel. After spending a few hours with his godfather and honorary uncle to give him advice, he was ready to return to Greengrass Estate. He was now armed with a stack of parchment, with a summary of what he really needed to do. He was ready to plan. Through his efforts there, he also had jobs for Sirius and Remus that would make them feel inclusive of the wedding party. He set to work. Harry and Daphne also met with Monty Wordsworth, apologized for having to shut him out the previous school year, and promptly gave the man the story about him finding out about being the rightful heirs of both Gryffindor and Slytherin. In return, Monty promised to hold off on the story until the morning edition immediately after the next Wizengamot session, when Harry would officially take control of 2 of the seats reserved for the heirs of the founders. Monty smiled and said, "Of course I can do that, Lord Potter. After all, far be it for me to ignore a direction from the man who is my ultimate boss." "I didn't know you knew that," said Harry. "I didn't want it to become an issue between us." Monty waved it off as if it was of no matter. The actual Wizengamot session was a breeze. No one was going to upset the again hero of the wizarding world by objecting to his claim to the two founders' seats. Of course, everyone wanted to shake his hand and be seen doing so. Some members even brought along a paid photographer to take wizarding photographs of the act. The only real annoyances of the evening were the number of heads who, not so subtly, wanted to propose the drafting of betrothal contracts between him and daughters of their houses. On that night, he received unofficial offers for the following students, still at Hogwarts: Patricia Stimpson and Katie Bell of Gryffindor, Henrietta Vesey, Miss Fake Boobs, and Millicent Bulstrode of Slytherin, Marietta Edgecombe, Morag McDougal and Shirley Fawcett of Ravenclaw, and Wilma Summerby of Hufflepuff. Once the article Monty wrote for The Prophet came out, the following 2 days of wedding planning had to be put on hold while the written offers of marriage and betrothal contracts could be sorted and dealt with. Of current students at Hogwarts, for those, he received offers for Shirley Fawcett, Victoria Frobisher, and Demelza Robbins of Gryffindor, Amanda Brocklehurst of Ravenclaw, and Eleanor Branstone of Hufflepuff. The others were names he did not recognize, or were simply as yet unnamed daughter of House so-and-so. How in Merlin's name am I supposed to look these girls in the eye when we get back to Hogwarts? He grumbled to Cygnus and Daphne. This is expected in these families, Harry, said Cygnus. Don't worry about it. However, you may want to consider some of these girls may have encouraged their head of house to make these offers. The same could be said for the older ones who have already graduated. Harry just sat back and grumbled under his breath. Just so you know, he said, after sitting back up again, I have no intention of doing this to any daughters we may have. Any contracts will not be considered until such time as they are old enough to make their own decision, and the prospective groom had also better be desiring of it. I think Michael Abbott and Gran had the right of it for Hannah and Neville. That's how I think these things should be done. Almost angrily moving documents around, he said, Look at this one. A betrothal contract for an as yet unborn daughter of the union of Harry James Potter and Daphne Ophelia Greengrass, and the firstborn son of Ignatius Wilfrid Wood and Juliet May Quirk, Bartwinkle Ian Wood, to be married when they come of age. Plus, they want guarantees the title of Lord Gryffindor will be, get this, passed to the product of their union. Duff and I have not even married yet, let alone, well, and they're looking for us to betroth her, if there is a heir complete with guaranteed title to the Gryffindor estates, and this is considered normal. I know Oliver Wood, Ignatius's younger brother, and he's a great bloke, but right now I just want to hunt him down and punch him in the mouth just for being related to this Cadmal Wood mongrel. A lot of these people are acting off the basis you and Daphne were betrothed at a young age, explained Cygnus, and probably believe you'd be open yourselves to such a contract. Well, I'm not, grumped Harry. Harry, said Cygnus, I think I better draft up the responses in the negative to each of these and just let you sign them. I don't want to find myself allied to you in a blood feud with another house just because you've referred to their head as a mongrel. Harry snorted. Thank you, Cygnus. That would be appreciated. Getting frazzled a little, Daphne called in Hermione and Tracy to help with the planning of the wedding. Both girls, they knew, had a head for scheduling. For more and more, Isabel stepped back to let them go. She only oversaw what was happening and made suggestions as necessary. With Sirius and Remus now acting as family for the groom, they brought in Wendell and Monica to act as honorary aunts and uncles for Harry. Sirius even coined the term Team Groom. Monica also fulfilled the role as the mother of the groom and was dragged in by Team Bride to work between the two. Harry was very happy to let them go for it, and only then had to make decisions. Of course, Neville was acting as best man, and in a fit of inspiration, he tagged the Weasley twins as the two other groomsmen. Daphne approved and said she was already planning on dropping hints if he didn't work it out for himself before too much longer. That was his biggest worry taken care of. You knew I was going to pick them? He asked her, surprised. Of course, she said. The only one who didn't know was you. Oh, he said sheepishly. We did, after all, have to pick colours that wouldn't clash with that Weasley red hair, she said. Now, you just have to go and ask them, and tell them that pranks are utterly banned for the event. You don't prank weddings, it's bad luck. That means the Weasley twins are crossed off the lists for the wedding and the reception. They're now wedding party. However, you need to find out if they have dates, and, if they do, we have to look at seating them. Make sure you find that out too. Got it, he said. While I'm at it, she continued, find out if Sirius or Remus have lady friends that need inviting, and anyone from the Black family we simply cannot leave out.
Got that too, he said.
By the end of the day, Harry learned that the twins wanted to bring Angelina Johnson and Alicia Spinnet, two of the chasers off the Gryffindor Quidditch team, as their dates. Harry had met both and liked them, and their names were added to the guest list and to the table of friends. Remus claimed he didn't have anyone, but Sirius took Harry aside and told him to invite Nymphadora Tonks. Harry remembered her being a seventh-year Hufflepuff in his first year, as Moony's date. Ted and Andromeda Tonks were invited as part of his extended family in the Blacks, and grudgingly, the names Dowager Lady Narcissa Malfoy, Draco Malfoy, and Pansy Parkinson, as his betrothed, were added for the same reason. Harry allowed them to be invited so long as Sirius brought a suitable date as well. He agreed. On the Greengrass side, young Tori's date was a surprise to Harry. Colin Creevey. Harry had fun tweaking her about it for about a day before both Isabel and Daphne told him to back off. Harry still intended to give him the shovel talk, though, but as way of apology to his future baby sister, he told Tori she could tell Colin he could be the official wedding photographer. Wizarding weddings didn't usually have one, so Harry had to explain the concept to Daphne and Isabel. They loved the idea. When Cygnus found out about it, he was surprised Harry suggested it. Think about it this way, he told his near-future father-in-law. As official photographer, young Colin is going to be too busy taking photographs to spend too much time around Tori. Thinking of that for a moment, Cygnus guffawed and slapped Harry on the back. Very devious of you, Lord Slytherin, he chuckled. Before he even realized how close it had become, the wedding was soon only a few days away. Harry was sent to Potter Manor to oversee the organization and preparation taking place there. At least, that's what he was told. In reality, Isabel and Daphne were already liaising with the Potter elves, and the little folk were already well informed as to what needed to happen. No, he was sent there because he was starting to become a bit of a nervous wreck, and he was driving the Greengrasses, Daphne in particular, to distraction. At Potter Manor, so that he didn't feel as if he was bouncing off the walls, Harry called in Neville, the twins, Blaise Zabini, Sirius and Remus to keep him company. That was a bad idea. Sirius, probably, dosed the butterbeers the boys were drinking with an alcohol-enhancing potion, not illegal but much frowned upon, and got the 5 young friends drunk. Early that evening, the Auras were called to Diagon Alley to deal with a disturbance. The 5 young men were stripped down to their underwear and were singing bawdy ditties at the top of their lungs in front of the steps of Gringotts. Aunt Amelia turned up in her official role as head of the DMLE, yelled at them, tied them all together using Incarcerus, and forced Harry to activate his portkey back to Potter Manor. The spinning made all 5 violently ill, and the elves were not happy cleaning up the mess they made of the floor of the Potter Manor Lord's office when they landed as a still bound-together mass sprawled on the floor. The next morning, the 5, still nursing hangovers while trying to eat something for breakfast, were blasted by 3 howlers, one from Daphne, one from Gran, and one from Mrs. Weasley, aimed at the twins. It was agreed that Mrs. Weasley was the most shrill, but Daphne's scored the most points for pure invectiveness. Harry found out later, while still nursing a hangover, that Sirius and Remus were also in the alley at the time under disillusionment charms to watch over them. They'd spent a lot of their time there, laughing their heads off at the 5 boys. Daphne had already called in to Greengrass Estate, Hermione and Tracy, but added Susan and Hannah to the planning team of Team Bride. Luna turned up the next day, 2 days before the wedding. Just to get out of the manor for a while, Harry took the menfolk, including Wendell, into Diagon Alley and to Twilfit and Tattings to make sure they were fully dressed in the finest robes available for the wedding. Of them all, Wendell seemed to be most amused by dressing as a real wizard. At first, it appeared Mr. Tatting wanted to throw him out of the store until Harry glared at the man. "I am Lord Harry James Potter, Slytherin, Gryffindor, and he is the father of Lady Hermione Jern Dagworth Granger. You will show the man respect." A bit of profuse apologizing, together with bowing and scraping, saw all of them well treated from that moment forth. The dresser did get his own dig back when he said, "I must say, Lord Potter, that rendition of the witch's cauldron you gave in the alley the other night was, shall we say, quite entertaining." Harry, Neville, and the twins all blushed, while Sirius and Remus sniggered. Remus had to tell Wendell what happened. All of them were fitted for formal robes with their house crests, including Wendell. They all wore plain black outer robes with silver inner robes. The only difference was that Harry had brought with him swatches of the material for the bride and bridesmaids. Harry was fitted with a bow tie and cummerbund in ivory, while Neville and the twins had the same but in the same colour as the bridesmaids' dresses, French green, which went well with the silver. "I think your future wife is trying to turn us 3 Gryffindors into Slytherins," said Neville, looking at himself in one of the full-length mirrors provided. "What?" the twins gasped in stereo, before running to another of the mirrors and checking out their reflections. "Yea, gad," said one. "What we to do?" said the other. "Suck it up," smirked Blaze. "Besides, I think you both should have been sorted into Slytherin in the first place."
"What are you
saying?" they cried. "You're resourceful, ambitious, and cunning," replied Blaze, ticking them off on his fingers. "Those are dominant Slytherin traits." Both seemed to deflate at that moment. "Oh dear," said one. "Busted," said the other. Sirius looked at them sharply for a moment before he said, "Oh?" Together the twins looked at him and sadly nodded. "That's where the hat Lee wanted to sort us. But we begged it to put is in Gryffindor," they said in stereo. "Whatever for?" asked Blaze. "We'd have been disowned if we'd gone into Slytherin," they replied. "Dad wouldn't, but Mum would." "It's all right, boys," said Sirius, smirking. "I did the same thing." After their fitting was complete, Harry led them down to Gringotts. He had Neville, Sirius, and Remus join him to go down to the Potter vaults. There they helped him pick out the perfect wedding rings. Sirius was the best at conjuring, so he created a perfect little paired ring box for them. He handed it to Harry, who placed the rings within, and then passed it to Neville. "There you go, Nev," he said. "As best man, it's your job to keep them safe until you hand them to me at the ceremony." Neville's chest swelled with pride as he dropped the box into an inner robe pocket. "They'll be safe with me, Harry." "Never doubted it, Nev," replied Harry. Sirius mock sniffled and mock dabbed his eyes. "I remember having the almost exact same conversation about the wedding rings of your parents, here, in this very vault, when your dad handed the ring box to me." Remus smacked him up back of the head and rolled his eyes. Back at the manor, everyone put away their wedding wear except Wendell and headed back down to the informal dining room for a late lunch. The fitting had taken longer than they expected. After they were finished, Wendell took his new robes and flew to the estate to show Monica what he'd be wearing. He returned about 2 hours later with Cygnus. "Cygnus," queried Harry, "what brings you here?" "Escape," he blandly said. Harry just grinned and said, "I think Remus is in the library and Sirius is— well, I have no idea where Sirius is. The rest of us are just bouncing about, trying to keep ourselves occupied." "Let's see," he mused. "Neville's in the greenhouses. The twins and Blaze have grabbed the old manor brooms and are whizzing about out there. And I was about to head to the office, thinking I should make a start on the ward book for the wedding." "Ah," said Cygnus. "Then let us head there. I'll show you how to enter names temporarily within it and how to make them time-sensitive." "Oh, good," said Harry. "I was just handed the list of wedding guests with how and when they'll arrive. I thought I'd have to enter them all in by hand and then rule them out after the reception." "Nope," said the older man. "There's a separate way to do what you want." Relieved, Harry led Cygnus to his office. Once in, he collected the ward book and took it back to the desk, ready to get started. When he was sitting down, Cygnus came around and showed him what to do. Finally, it was the day of the wedding. Harry was surprised, the evening before, when Greengrass estate elves turned up and moved all of Daphne's and his possessions from the estate into the Lord's bedroom at Potter Manor, when he wasn't looking. When he looked in the walk-in robe, he felt he nearly had a heart attack. What once looked huge in size now looked like they risked having insufficient space within. Neville, the twins, Blaze, Sirius, and Remus all stayed the night before, so they were all there for breakfast in the morning. The combined elves, including Dobby and Winky, were cooking up a storm in the kitchen, so the household had to have breakfast out of the kitchen for the day. The combined Greengrass and Potter house elves erected a huge white pavilion marquee the day before, so now Harry knew where the wedding was going to be held. They then set everything up inside it. After the boys left, the ballroom was configured to hold the reception and had been enlarged to both seat everyone and hold dancing afterwards. In the Daily Prophet that morning were details of the wedding that annoyed Harry because he felt it was a security risk. However, his instructions to the staff of the newspaper were they were allowed to print any story, so long as it was true, was in the public's best interest to know and wouldn't see them sued for libel. Therefore, having the details of his and Daphne's wedding displayed for all to see met with those guidelines, he couldn't now go and yell at them for it. They had the location and time of the event, plus the two families involved, of course. But they had not much else. Over at the Greengrass estate, the girls had been getting ready since mid-morning. There was little nervousness in this house of chaos. Expert wizarding beauticians had arrived to do makeup and hair. The elves were handing out light snacks that had no chance of staining dresses. Witches were talking a mile a minute, and Cygnus wished he could have dived out through the fireplace to Potter Manor early to get away from it all. Upstairs, in the ladies' parlour, the tables and paraphernalia had long since disappeared. Now it was a beauty salon with small dressing tables and large makeup mirrors for all the ladies. Even Monica was grabbed and sat at one of the stations when she arrived. Wendell, of course, wasn't even allowed in through the door and was told to instead go find Cygnus and keep him out of trouble. He found the Lord practically hiding in his office downstairs. The first thing Cygnus did was hand him a small glass of aged scotch, something Wendell was more than happy to accept. "Best to stay away from upstairs," said Cygnus solemnly. "No need to tell me twice," replied Wendell. The two men sat quietly, each lost to their thoughts for a time. After a while, Wendell asked, "Nervous, my friend?" Cygnus quietly thought for a while before replying, "No," strangely enough, more sad but satisfied. "I'm sad one of my little girls is now all grown up and will join her new husband in bed tonight," he said. "But I also know I haven't lost her. Harry is very much the son Isabel and I never had. When the time comes, I believe I'll be very happy to pass on the family headship and title of Regent Greengrass to him." They both sat there for a while before Cygnus asked, "Are you aware of any suitors in Hermione's life at this time?" "No," replied Wendell. "At least, not yet. I'm quite surprised by that. If I was to be honest to myself, she's nearly 16 years old now. I would have expected at least a casual boyfriend by now." "What about this Victor Crumb fellow?" asked Cygnus. "Another friend like Harry, I think," sighed Wendell. "She's keen to see him next week. She's going all the way to Bulgaria on her own, and I don't know what to make of that." Said Cygnus. "We want to hug them and protect them from harm. But they're also growing so fast. Next year, Hermione will be of age and considered an adult in our world. She will legally be free to go where she wants, without parental interference. This trip may be good for her." "That's what Mum tells me," said Wendell. "However, it's hard to just let go like that." "And yet we must," said Cygnus. "If we do not, they'll just resent us for it." Both men sighed. The wedding was scheduled for 6:00 p.m., and Harry was getting antsy. With the excuse he wanted to make sure everything outside was perfect, Harry grabbed his firebolt and went for a fly around the grounds, just to clear his head and stave off the panic attack he thought he was rapidly heading towards. When he came back to Earth, he discovered young Colin Creevey had arrived. "Why are you here already, Colin?" asked Harry. "I need someone to allow me in to Greengrass Estate to take photos of preparations there before they all come here," he said. "Ah," said Harry. "And they don't realize a wedding photographer in the Muggle world does that sort of thing." Colin shook his head. So Harry Flood called Cygnus and asked him to allow young Colin through. Cygnus asked for Colin's full name and said to wait about 5 minutes before sending him through. When he pulled his head back out again, Harry said, "You can go through in about 5 minutes. In the meantime, how go the photos you took for me?" "Oh, yes, "I have them here," he said, reaching into a large camera bag he had on his hip. Drawing forth a great stack, he handed them to Harry. "Thank you," said Harry. "How much more do I owe you?" "Ah," Colin said and giggled. "Nothing. What you've already given me isn't even half what it's cost me so far." "Good," said Harry. "I don't want you out of pocket, and make sure you charge me a good fee for taking wedding photographs today, all right?" "Lord Greengrass has covered that already," said the younger boy. "It's more than covered, actually." After Colin told him a little bit about what he was hoping to purchase with the money Harry and Cygnus had given him, Harry interrupted him before he got too enthusiastic. "It's been time enough," said Harry. "The Fleur address is Greengrass Estate."
"Thanks, Harry," said the chipper Colin.
He dashed in the Fleur powder and spun away to the estate. About 10 minutes before guests started arriving, Blaise took the boys aside and demonstrated the procedures for welcoming the guests, though Neville already knew most were arriving by portkey onto the front portico and were spaced 2 minutes apart. A select few were arriving by flues. Others were arriving by apparition beyond the gates and were then brought to the portico by a couple of house elves. It was almost literally all planned down to the last second. The first people to arrive were a small contingent of auras and hit wizards. They were going to be moving into positions to keep an eye on the guests. Some would be disillusioned, while others would be wearing polyjuice disguises. Blaise and the twins waited in the entry for those arriving by portkey or being brought in by apparition. They greeted them on their arrival and indicated their way through the manor to the back gardens. Neville and Harry were waiting at the fireplace in the parlour for those few arriving via that method. These guests, too, were sent through to the back garden. In the back gardens were a few tables containing light finger food for the guests while they were waiting for everyone bar the bridal party to arrive. Another 2 working guests were Monty Wordsworth and Penelope Clearwater, who were reporting on the wedding for the Daily Prophet and Teen Witch Weekly, respectively. Harry reminded them he knew they were here to do a job, but not to unduly bother the guests. They could write their stories, but not be nuisances. "Be flies on the wall," he told them. "Be passive journalists, not active. And if you want or need photographs for your articles, we have a young and very skilled photographer who can meet your needs. I assure you he's more than up to the task. You'll see him performing his role shortly before the bride and her family arrive." After thanking him for his thoughtfulness in inviting them and meeting their needs, they headed out to the back gardens. A few of the minor guests yet wanted to talk to Harry about betrothal contracts. Already prepared for the possibility of someone trying to use the occasion of meeting him to foist such a betrothal contract on him, Harry gave the general response of, "That is a matter for another possible time. Thank you for coming, and I hope you enjoy the ceremony and celebration." Once he'd thought all 300 guests had arrived, as all the ones coming via Fleur had, Harry turned to Blaise and asked, "Any left via the front doors?" "Nope," the other boy smiled. "That's it, except for the bridal party." Harry breathed a sigh of relief and said, "Thank you for doing that, Blaise. It was really appreciated." A quick glance at his watch and he said, "All right, a quick drink and short mingle, and we'll need to get the guests into the wedding pavilion." The Granger adults, Susan and Hannah, had already arrived and were outside. Of course, Tracy and Hermione were with Daphne, as they, plus Astoria, were bridesmaids. The 5 of them headed out through the back doors to once more greet the guests before ushering them down to the marquee. As Harry stood on the small dais with Neville, the twins and the wizarding minister, he was fidgeting and looking out upon the sea of faces there to watch him and Daphne marry. Playing in the background was Bach's Air on a G-string, chosen for its soothing quality, but it was doing little to soothe Harry's nervousness. "Harry," whispered Neville, "relax, would you? She's being fashionably late. It's tradition." Looking on the groom's side of the aisle, Harry could see Sirius, his date, Remus, Nymphadora Tonks, Gran and Aunt Amelia sitting in the front row. The rest of the guests were behind. He saw Ted and Andromeda Tonks sitting there with Narcissa Malfoy, but not Draco. He was on the other side. He could see Ginny and other Hogwarts friends, including Professors Flitwick, Sprout, Babbling Vector, and McGonagall, and Madame Pomfrey. Ravenclaw classmates were also there. On the bride's side and in the front row, he saw Isabel, the adult Grangers, and a couple of people he didn't know but expected to be aunts, uncles, and cousins. He saw a couple of people from Slytherin behind them, including Draco Malfoy and Pansy Parkinson, and others behind even them. The guest list included most of the Wizengamot, many department heads from within the ministry, a lot of auras, and some unspeakables. He recognized Uncle Algy sitting off to one side. However, most of them he didn't know until they'd arrived. Until then, they were just names on the guest list. The ones he was being most careful around were those pure bloods he knew who were supposed to be supporters of the late Tom Riddle. He, Cygnus, Sirius, Remus, and Amelia knew they were too important not to invite, and still very dangerous. At about 10 minutes past the mark, Colin came in and raced up the aisle towards Harry. "Face me, please, gents." As soon as everyone was in position, he took a couple of photographs. He then lowered his camera, grinned, spun about, and waited. "Here she comes," muttered Harry, getting even more fidgety. Suddenly, the bridal processional, Wagner's bridal chorus, started up. Though he knew it to be a favorite of formal Muggle weddings, he didn't know it was the same with wizarding weddings. The guests all rose as one and turned to the doors at the rear to await the arrival of the bride. The curtains marking the door into the marquee were evenly pulled aside by magic, and in came Cygnus walking proudly with his eldest daughter Daphne on his arm. Harry took one look at her, let out a little eep sound, and thought he was going to faint. Neville reached out and squeezed Harry on his left elbow. "Easy, Harry," he whispered. "Breathy." Harry dimly heard his best mate, but found himself complying. With his heart thumping away, he clamped on his occlumency and tried to get his breathing and heart rate under control by lightly mediating. All too soon, or for what felt like forever, Daphne was being guided by her father to Harry's side before the minister. He almost forgot the wizarding tradition of reaching over and shaking Cygnus's hand before the man moved over to sit next to Isabel. Harry almost missed Tracy, Hermione, and Astoria moving into position on the other side of Daphne. Almost inconsequentially, he thought they looked nice. As the bride and groom parties turned back to face the minister, the processional came to a faded stop. The minister very quietly cleared his throat and said, "Dearly beloved." As Harry pulled away from the kiss with Daphne, the minister said aloud, "My lords, ladies and gentlemen, I present to you Lord Harry James Potter, Slytherin Gryffindor, and his wife, Lady Daphne Ophelia Greengrass Potter." The guests rose in their seats and clapped. Turning to look at the guests, Harry blushed as he saw many of the ladies within the audience, especially up-close family and friends, were crying. Looking across, he even saw Pansy Parkinson dab her eyes with a lace handkerchief as Malfoy rolled his. On his side of the divide, he saw Professor Flitwick was standing on his chair, almost bouncing up and down in happiness. Alongside him, Professor McGonagall was similarly dabbing her eyes. Standing in the middle of the aisle, just before Harry and the now complete bridal party were about to walk off the dais, was young Colin happily taking photographs. As the recessional Merit's Rondeau played, Harry first shook the hand of the minister before he hooked Daphne's arm in his own and escorted her back up the aisle. Behind them, Neville did the same for Tracy, and each of the twins did the same for Hermione and Tori. Daphne wanted bridal party photographs taken out in the garden, so Colin had come and scoped the place out the day before to know where to take them. He led them around to the front of the manor to have photographs taken there. First, once all the guests had left the marquee and gone indoors, he led them back around to the back gardens to have photos taken out there. With the light finally fading away, they headed indoors and allowed for photographs to be taken in the small, for a manor entrance hall in front of the huge Potter crest, opposite the front doors. There they were joined in succession by guests who wanted a photograph taken with the happy couple. Finally, when Harry felt like his cheeks were going to cramp from smiling so much, the posed photographs came to an end, and the newlyweds led their attendants into the ballroom for the reception, as Sirius called for all to rise and once again welcome them. Now it was Sirius's and Remus's chance to shine as co-hosts of the evening, acting in the role of MCs, and after a quick introduction and overview of what would happen for the evening, they called for the wedding feast to be served. While he and Daphne sat in the center of the head table, Harry was able to look out across the guests enjoying the meal, However, every now and then he would glance down at the recently restored wedding band sitting paired with the betrothal ring on his left ring finger, or look over to see the one on Daphne's finger, just to make sure it was real. The speeches were restricted to only those people on the approved list to give them, and to go for no more than 5 minutes, so the reception would not get bogged down by people droning on and on. This was something both Harry and Daphne insisted upon. Remus led with the toast to the bride and groom. He kept it quite sweet with just a small playful jab at Harry. Harry followed with the expression of thanks to Remus and Sirius for being part of his first family, then spoke about his love for those in the wedding party, before toasting the bridesmaids. Neville's response speech as best man on behalf of the bridesmaids was quite funny, while also respectful. The minister gave the toast to the bride's parents, and thankfully didn't use the opportunity to politicize. The speech from the father of the bride was quite poignant, but also quite uplifting. Cygnus was a great orator. Gran then gave the speech to the groom's parents as one of remembrance for the heroes they were, and used the opportunity to remind everyone that Harry was just as much a hero. Once the initial speeches were out of the way, Sirius had the elves bring out the Potter family pensieve. "It has become a bit of a tradition in Muggle wedding receptions," he began, "to show on a big screen photographs and moving pictures of the bride and groom growing up. These scenes are usually things like their first baby photo, their first day going to school and sporting awards they receive, a visit to the beach or an amusement park, a graduation day, their first date, and so forth. Happy memories of a childhood. But we're in the wizarding world and we can do things a little differently." Indicating the pensieve, he said, "Unlike Muggles, we can display memories, and Remus and I went around and collected a few special ones." Then he evilly laughed. "Mudwa, ha ha ha." That earned him a few laughs from the guests while Harry groaned and dropped his head to the table, which earned him a few laughs. It didn't turn out as bad as Harry expected. Yes, there were a few of him as a baby with his parents. He remembered chasing the family cat on his toy broom and giggling like crazy, and projectile vomiting on Peter Pettigrew. But what made it funnier was Sirius narrating what people were seeing. After running through Harry's infancy, no one wanted to show what happened from October 1981 until he returned to the wizarding world. They moved on to Daphne's childhood. From those, he learned that, as a child of about 5, Daphne had accidentally discovered a spell to turn everything pink when she picked up her mother's wand. Everything, including the house elves, the manor, and, more importantly, her mother and baby sister. Then they moved on to Harry and Daphne together. Short memories of them getting to know one another at the estate when they were 11, and then at Hogwarts, their first transfiguration, first charm working on assignments together in the library. Harry blushing when Daphne kissed him on the cheek in public, her running into the Great Hall on Valentine's Day 1992 with her first twinned roses, and snogging him in front of everyone, them sharing a picnic by the lake, the short part of Harry and Neville fighting the basilisk in Harry loaded down with shopping bags on a shopping trip to Muggle London, their dance at the Yule Ball, Harry trying on new clothes while Daphne ordered him about, and his reciting of poetry to her in the Great Hall while carrying a large bouquet of red roses. A lot of memories were covered in a short space of time. When it finished, a lot of the guests were talking excitedly among themselves. It was a wonderful concept, and Harry could see a lot of guests really enjoyed it. Though it was embarrassing for the both of them, in some parts. With that concluded, the newlyweds led the opening dance on the dance floor. The bridal party then joined in, quickly followed by others. Harry managed to dance with Daphne, Tracy, Hermione, Susan, Hannah, Luna, Isabel, Monica, Aunt Amelia, Gran, and even Pansy for a short time. As the evening was winding to a close and guests were slowly filtering out, Harry realized just how happy he was. Life felt complete. The feeling was not to last. The newlyweds had decided to flee magical Britain that very night to start their honeymoon. Neither trusted either Sirius nor the twins not to unmercifully prank them on the very night they were married. Once all the guests were gone, the two changed into traveling clothes, Harry left the note he'd prepared earlier on the informal dining table, a place he knew would be checked, and, together, they grabbed their luggage and used a goblin-prepared portkey to take them to the International Portkey Arrival Point in Washington, D.C., in the USA. The shift from Merlin's Bridge in Haverfordwest in Wales to Washington, D.C. regained the new Lord and Lady Potter another 5 hours of day. It was a few minutes to midnight when they left, and almost exactly 7:20 p.m. when they landed. Passing out of the international arrival point and through magical customs and immigration, Harry realized they'd arrived in a hidden section of Dulles International Airport. "Okay, wow," he said. The pair then exchanged some galleons for American franklins and United States dollars, then moved across to the domestic portkey departure area to take a portkey to Many, the magical area of New York. From there, they took a public flu to the Greengrass penthouse. They were met in the penthouse by a Greengrass house elf. "Hello, Gabby," said Daphne to the elf. "Miss Daphne," exclaimed the elf. "How be you?" "We're well, thank you," she replied. "You're aware that, as of tonight, I'm now Lady Potter?" "Oh, yes, Miss Daphne," gushed the elf. "And be this Lord Potter?" "That's correct," she replied. "This is Lord Harry James Potter, Slytherin, Gryffindor." "Welcome, Master Harry," said the elf, coming forward and taking Harry's hand in both of hers and touching the back of his fingers to her forehead. Harry remembered the gesture from when Daphne was recognized by the Potter elves. "Thank you, Gabby," he said. Stepping back, the little elf told Daphne, "I have prepared a light supper for you both if you is hungry. You will also find time jump potions on your nightstands in the master bedroom." Gabby then popped away with their luggage. The entire trip from Potter Manor to Penthouse Greengrass took them less than half an hour, and most of that was spent passing through customs. Now that they were finally at the first stop on their honeymoon, Harry became quite nervous. He tried. "Shall we give Gabby time to get everything ready and have that snack? Or what do you want to do?" With a sly smile, Daphne replied, "Snack first. As you said, we'll give her time to properly unpack. Then I think we should head for bed. While it might be only 7 p.m, here it's midnight, where we left. And we did have a very busy day." Okay," he sheepishly replied. "That makes a lot of sense." After a few nibbles on snacks, Harry asked, "Yes, and? What shall we do now?" Daphne giggled and said, "Well, Lord Potter, it's time for you to make your wife physically." She took him by the hand and dragged him upstairs to the master bedroom. "Roger," he said, as he was being dragged along. Harry woke the next morning to sunshine coming in through the window. At first he wondered what was lying cuddled to his side and partially on his chest. Then he remembered. "Wow," he thought, with a grin, "that was amazing." Thinking back to the previous evening, he remembered Daphne dragging him up to the master bedroom of the penthouse and practically ordering him to get ready for bed. He ducked into the ensuite bathroom, brushed his teeth, and stripped down to his boxers before returning to the bedroom. As he walked out, Daphne looked down and saw his excitement before giggling and brushing past him to take her own turn in the ensuite. He'd crawled into bed and waited. He'd almost drifted off to sleep when Daphne finally came out. It would have been disastrous if he had. She was wearing a short diaphanous nightgown that left nothing to the imagination of what was underneath, especially as she was backlit by the light coming from the bathroom. With a sultry smile on her face, she calmly walked over to the bed, drew back the covers and climbed in. Harry was as hard as a rock in anticipation. They started together quite tenderly, with just a cuddle and sensuous kiss. Then things got going from there. By the time he was poised to enter her for the first time, he hesitated. "I've heard it can hurt a girl. The first time," he said. Looking up at him, she tenderly brushed his cheek with the palm of her hand. "Don't worry," she near whispered. "I've taken a special potion Mum got for me. It won't hurt." With a groan of relief, Harry then pushed through, forcing himself right to the hilt. He didn't know for how long they made love that night, but from the angle of the sun coming in through the window, he knew it was early to mid-morning outside, New York time. That would make it early afternoon back in magical Britain. He was trying to move in such a way as not to wake his new wife. he thought to himself, a grin plastering his face. I'm married and have a wife, but realized when she suddenly grabbed him tight that he'd woken her anyway. Good morning, Lady Potter, he quietly said. She said, relaxing and snuggling in. I like that. So do I, he softly replied. But I've got to get up. No, you don't, she softly whined. We're on our honeymoon. Actually, yeah, I do, he replied with a bit of a chuckle. Nature calls. With a grumbling sigh, she released him. Hurry back, she said, as he climbed out of bed. I think I need you to make me Lady Potter again. Harry startled a little before he dashed into the bathroom to do what he needed to do. A quick breath-freshening charm, and he ran back to the bed, diving under the covers. Daphne giggled and said, Find motivation, did you? Though she couldn't see it, he grinned back before snuggling in for more of what he had the night before. Daphne giggled again. An hour later, and they finally decided it was time they both got up. Daphne had planned on showing Harry the sights of Many and New York in general, and she'd lose the opportunity to show him around if they didn't make a start on it. Dressing in lightweight muggle wear, Daphne took him direct to Many. Harry was astounded. While the area did not appear to be ultra-modern, it was way more modern than the Victorian-era style shop facades back in Diagon Alley. Inside, the stores were just as modern. They had electric lighting and cash registers, and this surprised no one. Electricity, Harry gasped to Daphne. They're using electricity. Daphne nodded and said, Yes, the magicals of America aren't as backwards as they are in Britain. I love my home country, but we're just so antiquated. While we use magical candles and torches, they've moved with the times and modernized. It's an area I intend to explore when we've finished our education. You've not spoken much on what you plan to do once we graduate before, he said. Is this what you want to do? Hesitating a moment to think on it, she replied. It is. As you know, my father is involved in the import business. I want to start up a similar endeavor and import much of what they take for granted here. That's a wonderful idea, said Harry, happy she'd decided on what she wanted to do with her life. The Wizengamot and Ministry have blocked, through legislation, much of what I wanted to do, she said. However, now that you've just picked up 2 new lordships, soon to be 3, you can now work towards getting the support of your fellow lords to see that legislation overturned. Nodding, he mused, I can do that. I needed a focus for my legislative agenda. That can be part of it. Part? She asked. What else are you planning? With a shrug, he replied, overturning the laws discriminating against half-bloods and muggle-borns. While talking with Professor Flitwick, I learned that half-bloods pay about a quarter again what pure-bloods pay, and muggle-borns pay about double. I told him I wanted that immediately scrapped, but the professor said it was a legal requirement. Therefore, I need to overturn the law that forces it. And since I'm going to do that anyway, I thought I might as well get rid of all the laws that discriminate. She chuckled. The pure-blood traditionalists are going to hate you. They do, already, he smiled. After all, I just bumped off their hero riddle. True, she mused. After shopping for a bit and checking out a store that sold enchanted electronic equipment to homeowners, the newlyweds stopped at a coffee shop to go over some of the information Harry managed to get out of the store owner who sold the electronics. They're enchanted, he said. They use runes to create null magic fields within the electronic equipment to stop ambient magic affecting the inner workings. Plus, they can also use specific power runes to provide electric power in place of electric cords and plugs. It's also very clever. Daphne nodded and said, I've ordered and paid for a couple of different items to be shipped home. I'm going to open them up and have a look how they do it. You're not worried about intellectual property, he asked. No, she replied. I'm hoping I can design a different way so we can do it ourselves back in Britain. If not, then I'm hoping to pay a royalty fee for the use of their rune set designs, and if I can't do that, that's where the import business comes into play. Harry could see the logic of it and nodded. After their bite to eat, they headed out into Muggle New York to have a look at some of the sights before finally returning to the penthouse late afternoon. They spent the evening practicing making ears. After a couple of days in New York, they moved up to Salem, Massachusetts. There they caught the magical ferry from Palmer Cove and visited the Salem Witches' Institute, which had its own island under a combined Muggle-repelling charm and wide area Fidelius in Salem Sound near Beverly Harbor. As they boarded the ferry, they were shown a huge sign that said, "The Salem Witches' Institute is located in Salem Sound." Harry wanted to know how the whole thing worked if there was a Fidelius, so talked to the pilot of the ferry. "Well," the man began, "when a secret keeper dies, those who knew of the secret at that time all become the new secret keepers. The founder of the school, Samantha Stevens, bless her immortal soul, chose a secret keeper for the charm who did not have long to live, and before that person died, she had them make that sign you saw when you boarded, plus 2 more. That way, you can only get to know where the school is by boarding this old ferry, at least once. At least, this one or one of the other 2. We've got 3 now. And when a ferry needs replacing, that sign gets moved to the new one. The other huge hiding charm on the school is the non-mag repelling charm. I think you folks call it a Muggle repelling charm. Don't care much for that term myself. Nor did I care for the term we used to use here, mortal. It made no sense, seeing as we're also mortal, just longer lived. Anyways, this is all information you can read about in the book Salem: A History. You can buy a copy of it in the bookstore available on the island. After thanking the man for the information, the 2 sat back to enjoy the short ride out to the island. "This is nice," said Harry. "Don't know if I'd think so if there was a major storm, though. I'm sure they have magical means in place for just such an eventuality," Daphne replied. "And what did you think of that huge hall we came through to board the ferry?" he asked. "There were more fireplaces than what I remembered at the ministry, plus they had an attached multi-story car park. The brochure says it appears to be a huge abandoned dockside warehouse to Muggles, or non-mags, as they call them here," she said. "For Muggle parents, the driver wears a bracelet that allows him or her to see where they need to go. Other Muggles in the automobile are warned to close their eyes just before they pass through the ward, because it can be disconcerting, otherwise for them." On the island, Harry and Daphne were met by the school headmistress, or principal, as they call them in America, Ms. Tabitha Stevens. After a short tour, the 2 were escorted to the principal's offices. She offered them refreshments before Harry said, "I have to admit, I expected to see a school for witches, only—" Tabitha, as she asked them to call her, chuckled and said, "We've been co-ed for almost 30 years now. Originally it was just a trial to have boys attend, but it remained in place. Officially it's still just a trial, just ongoing. I very much doubt we'll be going back to witches only, though. There is something to be said psychologically for allowing boys and girls to learn together rather than apart. The boys' school in Richmond, Virginia, the Richmond Warlock School, now caters for our little ones." "Your name, Stevens?" "My mother was the founder," she interrupted. "The witches in our line maintain their maiden name. I was trained from a young age to eventually be the principal for the school. I guess you could say this school is my birthright." "Your mother?" asked Daphne. "Alive," sighed Miss Stevens. "She retired when my father, a non-mag, passed away about 5 years ago now." "I'm sorry," said Daphne. Miss Stevens waved it off and said, "It was expected. Dad died of cancer, a non-mag disease that thankfully does not strike us of magical ability." With another sigh she said, "Dad loved this place. He was an advertising executive by profession. Almost until he died, he handled all the advertising and public relations work for the school. My younger brother, Adam, has taken over from him. Anyways," she said, giving herself a bit of a shake, "sorry for reminiscing. Maudlin moments strike me now and then. You've come to see if you can acquire, shall we say, information on improving standards at Hogwarts. I must say, I feel relish for the opportunity to assist." Harry and Daphne spoke with Tabitha for quite a while. She even brought in some of her teaching staff to give their ideas. Mostly, it was felt the old castle needed to be modernized before much of the modern teaching practices could be implemented. They came away from the school quite happy with what they learned, though. Tabitha was even willing to host the odd professor or 2 from Hogwarts to show them teaching principles and methods they employed. As a treat, Harry took Daphne down to Florida for 2.5 days of fun at Disney World, staying at the top-class hotel in one of their penthouse suites. She'd never before been to an adventure park resort. She'd heard of them, but never even seen one before. Then again, neither had Harry. He just knew of their existence and knew they'd have fun, which they did. The days were filled with fun and thrills where they played hard. The nights were filled with a different sort of fun. To calm things down a bit, they took an international portkey across to France to spend a few days at La Retraite de Portier, the Potter family chateau on Chemi Lieutenant Aviateur Paul Guiraud in Toulon, on the south coast of France. This required a major time zone change, so unlike what they did in New York, they actually took their time jump potion to get their inner clocks synchronized with the local time. The next morning they awoke to wonderful views and a gorgeous sea breeze. From the south-facing balcony, they had a beautiful view over Costa Azura, the French Riviera. While in America they had sex, in France they made love. In America it was hard and energetic, in France it was slow and sensual. After 2.5 days, and Harry rebonding the two house elves to House Potter while there, they moved on. They headed for the Basque country in northern Spain, near the city of Bilbao. Daphne was on a mission for her father to renew contact with one of his contacts, who worked imports for him from Spain. They found him at the port of Bilbao in the port business area of a Baracaldo. On the way to see the man, Harry asked, "So what does this old Basque gypsy do for your father?" Daphne laughed and said, "Oh, he's not a gypsy, though that's the image he cultivates. He's a Basque anarchist. That means magic user. At least, that's what he likes to think he is. For us, what he is an exporter. He works as the collection point for many of the magical growers in Spain. He gathers all the plant-based potion ingredients, fruits, vegetables, and the like that Dad imports and exports them to Dad. There's another man in Antwerp in northern Belgium and another in Esbjerg in western Denmark. At least, those are the ones I know down the west coast of Europe. But anyway, we don't need to worry about any of those. We just need to see Senor Caballero." Harry burst out laughing. "Seriously?" he asked. "That's what he calls himself?" "Yes," she replied. "What's so funny?" "Well," he snickered, "Senor Caballero can translate out a number of ways. Mr. is one, so Sir Knight and Gentleman Lord. When we see him, call him Sir Knight and see what he does," he suggested. When they finally did track him down in a magical waterside dive bar at that, she said, "Well, Sir Knight, is this the way a gentleman lord should behave?" He burst out laughing and gave her a light pinch on her cheek. "I like you, Lady Greengrass Potter. You have, how they say, a gallas?" "Yes?" "He means spunk, pluck, courage," Harry wryly supplied for her. "And this fine young gentleman with you?" the old scallywag asked her. "My husband, Lord Slytherin," she smirked. "My father, Lord Greengrass, requests you contact him and let him know by which name you're going by now. His messages to you don't seem to get through." He laughed a big raucous laugh and said, "Then I shall do just that, Mrs. Slytherin." "Thank you," she said in a flat voice. He tried to get her and Harry to join him in a drink of the local wine, but she begged off and the newlyweds took their leave. After they walked out, Harry said, "A rather unsavory sort, is he not?" She shrugged and said, "Maybe, but generally reliable. He's able to acquire goods Dad's unable to get anywhere else, and we'll leave it at that." Harry grinned and said, "We can do that." From northern Spain they headed direct to Paris. Daphne wanted a couple of nights in the City of Lights and romance before they finally headed for home, and Harry wanted to drop by the Delacour to meet the promise he made to Jean-Paul and Apolline during the Triwizard Tournament. They stayed the night in the District de Magie and sent off an owl. The next morning, Apolline turned up and practically ordered them to pack and follow her through the Flue to Delacour Manor in the little coastal village of Piriac-sur-Mer, on the Bay of Biscay. Straight line, it was about 400 kilometers due north of where they were in Bilbao. As Harry stepped out of the Flue in Delacour Manor, he was almost tackled to the ground by a pale, blonde-haired 9-year-old. He first thought a younger version of Tori had planned to meet them there. "Harry, mon héros, vous avez frappé à visiter," "Harry, my hero, you've come to visit," gushed the girl. "Gabrielle," he asked the top of the head of the little person who was currently trying to squeeze the life out of him with her hands wrapped around his waist. "Oui. Yes," she said, looking up at him. "Comment vas-tu, ma petite princesse?" "How are you, my little princess?" he asked with a chuckle. "Je vais bien, merci. I am well, thank you," she brightly replied. "Pourquoi êtes-vous ici? Why are you here?" "Vos parents m'ont invité. Your parents invited me," he replied. Pulling away from him and looking at Daphne, she asked him, "Et qui est-ce? And who is this?" "Ah," replied Harry. Reaching out to take Daphne's hand, he said, "C'est ma femme Daphne, Dame Daphne Greengrass Potter. Vous n'avez pas eu la chance de la rencontrer alors que vous étiez à Hogwarts. This is my wife, Daphne, Lady Daphne Greengrass Potter. You didn't get the chance to meet her while you were at Hogwarts." She backed away from him and stamped her little foot. "Vous auriez dû me marier. Vous êtes mon chevalier en armure étincelante, et vous m'avez sauvé du fond de ce lac horrible. You should have married me. You are my knight in shining armor, and you rescued me from the bottom of that horrid lake," she grumped. "Gabrielle," snapped Apolline. "Harry and Daphne have been together since they were 11 years old. They have been betrothed to one another since they were born. It is unfair of you to deny the love they have for one another." Gabrielle just stood there and pouted before her expression, again changed to one of happiness. She ducked back in and hugged him again. "I am still glad you are here," she said, before she released him and ran off, giggling. "Another of the hostages?" asked Daphne. Harry nodded and said, "Fleur's hostage." "Come," said Apolline, "I shall show you to your room." As the newlyweds followed Apolline through the manor, Harry said to Daphne, "The Delacours are of the singular impression I am responsible for saving Gabrielle's life. I am unable to disabuse them of that notion." "Because it is true," Apolline said firmly, over her shoulder. "You also may not agree, but you did eat again when you killed that battered Tom Riddle on the night of the task." "That, my lady," said Harry, with a bit of a sad grumble, "was just Potter blind luck. And I killed him to save my own life. Everyone else's was just supplemental." As Apolline stopped and indicated an open door off the hall, Daphne reached across and smacked Harry on the back of the head. "Ow," he said, glancing over at her. "What was that for?" With a sigh, she said, "Because sometimes you're an idiot. You trained since you were 11 years old to take Riddle out. For 3.5 years you worked hard to develop the skills necessary to defeat him. That is not blind luck." She then stormed into the room a few steps before spinning around and glaring at him again. "Honestly, Harry," she said, exasperated, "you worked hard to beat him. You trained hour after hour against those target dummies. You figured out how to draw in more magical power to augment the impressive amount you already had. You practiced holding that magical power within you. And when you weren't actually training, you were learning more curses, charms, hexes, jinxes, and even just cantrips, just in case any single one of them could have been the one that allowed you to beat him. You trained to increase your speed, your magical and physical stamina, your casting, everything, anything you could use, in some way to defeat that evil man. You learned and added to your list of impressive skills." Throwing her hands up in mock despair, she said, "Harry, you are a hero. You're Gabrielle's hero. You're Apolline's hero. You're Magical Britain's hero. But more than that, you're my hero. Accept it, you noble git." Harry strode the couple of steps forward it took to wrap Daphne in his arms, and did so holding her tight. "Well said, Daphne," Apolline firmly said. "Very well said indeed." Hesitating a couple of moments, she then said, "Make yourselves comfortable. I shall meet you down in the informal sitting room." Then she pulled the door closed on the two. They had been at Delacour Manor for a couple of days, and Jean-Paul had even taken him into his offices at the French Ministry of Magic when he received a message from Sirius via his mirror. "Dumbledore's dead, pup," said Sirius. "They think it's just due to old age, but they're not ruling out foul play." Harry sighed and said, "What do they know?" He was supposed to have attended a meeting he'd organized with the head of the Unspeakables and never turned up, explained Sirius. At first, they thought he'd decided just not to go. However, he didn't turn up for a meeting at the Hogshead, his brother's pub, in Hogsmeade, either. Dumbledore had been trying to convince Phileas to again allow him access to Hogwarts, but Phileas kept blowing him off. "That was my doing," said Harry. "I'd told Professor Flitwick he was banned from the grounds." With a nod, Sirius continued, "Well, Phileas finally agreed to meet with him, not to let him in, but to tell him in person he was banned from the grounds. But he didn't show. So Phileas convinced Aberforth, Dumbledore's brother and owner of the Hogshead, to pay him a visit at the Dumbledore cottage in Godric's Hollow. That's where Dumbledore's been living. Aberforth found him there, dead. So Aberforth called in the Aurors to investigate. Your Aunt Amelia led the investigation, but all they found was him dead. There was nothing out of place, and the wards hadn't been damaged, so they think he just up and died." "Well," sighed Harry, "I hate to say it, but I'm a little relieved, quite frankly." "There's no shame in that," said Sirius. "The man made your life a living hell. Anyway," he said, changing the subject, "when are you looking to come home?" "Soon," replied Harry. "The next day or so, at any rate. Daphne and I want to get to Hogwarts and take a look at how the elves have done with the modernization of our new suites. Plus, their friends and such we want to catch up with." "Not me," pouted the old dog. "Of course you too," laughed Harry. "You and Remus both. But I think Daphne wants to put her personal touches onto Potter Manor, now that it's her home," said Harry. "That's fair enough," said Sirius. "Your mother did exactly the same when she and your father married." After finishing his talk with Sirius, Harry went off in search of Daphne. He found her talking with Apollin and Gabrielle in the parlour. "Hi, love," he said. "What's wrong?" she asked, a little worried. "Sirius called to let me know Dumbledore's dead," he replied. "It seems it all got too much for him and he passed away." Daphne seemed to think about that for a few moments before she firmly said, "Good. With the amount of interference he had in your life, especially subjecting you to the Dursleys, I think I'm rather glad." Harry leaned over and gave her a kiss on the cheek. "Me too," he simply said. "I shall have to let John Paul know immediately," said Apollin. "However, I too am glad he is dead." She rose and went to the fireplace to call her husband. After 2.5 weeks of honeymoon, about how long they'd planned, they returned to magical Britain. They arrived via international portkey in the portkey arrivals lounge at the Ministry, startling the immigration and customs people of the DMLE with who they found arriving. They quickly passed through customs and headed down to the atrium to flew away back to Potter Manor. They arrived to an empty manor, except for the elves, of course, and allowed Petey and Ninny to take their bags upstairs to unpack. Harry took a wander through the grounds, outside, while Daphne covered inside. They met back in the entry hall. "How many?" he simply asked. "3, she grinned. "You?" "1, he said, a charm on the broom closet to make the brooms come out and dance when the door was opened. "How about yours?" "1 on the bed linked to a monitoring charm I think my mother put in place," she said. Harry interrupted, probably there to make sure neither of us gets hurt while practicing baby-making. She blushed and smacked him on the arm. "Anyways," she said, trying to continue, "there was another on the toilet that would have made ribald comments, I think. And it's the sort of toilet humor I'd expect of your godfather." "Ha-ha," Harry said in a flat voice. With a smirk, she said, "The third wasn't a prank, though." He face took on a frown before she said, "There was a pretty complex compulsion charm on your office chair. I think someone must have snuck in there from the reception and placed it. I've no idea who, though." "You've removed it?" he asked. "Yes," she replied. "I have this sneaking suspicion someone wants you to sign something you shouldn't." He said. "They'd anticipated I'd do my paperwork in there at the desk. We may never know who did it." "I guess we should thank the twins and Sirius for making us so paranoid," she said. "If it wasn't for our belief they'd use the opportunity of us being away to set up pranks, we might not have scanned everything." "I'll let Aunt Amelia know about the compulsion charm," he said. "And if something comes in that looks like it might have been tied to the charm, I'll call her in. In the meantime, I have some revenge pranking to do." "We, dear, we," chided his love. "Of course," he contritely replied. "How silly of me to forget that." After visiting the green grasses, that is, Cygnus, Isabel and Astoria, to let them know they were back, the two then went to the Black House to let Sirius and Remus know. Then, as Harry was eager to look, it was off to the castle to have a look at the modified suites. They were not stopped by anyone as they entered the castle, so just quietly walked up to the third floor. Harry was about to give the password, "Courage Under Fire," when the portrait simply slid out of the way before he could do so. Walking up the short flight of stairs and into the original living room, Harry said, "Wow, I'll say," said Daphne, moving up to his side. With a soft double pop, Frosty and Macy appeared before them. "Welcome back, my lord and lady," said Frosty. "Thank you, Frosty Macy," said Harry, as Daphne did the same. "Are the alterations completed?" "Yes, my lord," said Frosty. "Thank you," replied Harry. The living room was now decked out as a study area. The walls had been cleaned and freshly painted in a soft driftwood color, with a hint of pink to add the sense of warmth. Curtains adorned the windows. The potions lab had been retained and modernized. There were now plenty of potions ingredients, all under stasis charms. The armory had been converted into a small library. The walls were filled with bookshelves, plus there were two sitting back-to-back down the middle of the room. It left just enough room for two people to pass one another down each aisle. The shelves were filled with the books the elves had rescued from the come-and-go room, and there was a lot more than either Harry or Daphne remembered being in the room when they'd used it. Across the way, the kitchen was still a kitchen, but the old brick oven and hot plate had been replaced with a large cast-iron stove. There was again food in the pantry, with all of it under stasis charms. There was now a second door along the same side as the door to the kitchen. A quick look inside showed it was a half-bath and toilet. That is, a toilet with a small vanity included. Upstairs in the master bedroom, the bed had been improved upon with modern sheets, pillows, pillowcases, and doonas. The walk-in robe now had better shelving and hanging space, and the bathroom had a complete makeover, including a large shower and private toilet. Throughout, the same paint color scheme was used as in the common room. The floors were now covered in wall-to-wall carpet in all the dry areas of the apartment, and Harry could feel a decent underlay underneath the carpet. From there, they took the connecting passage down to the old Slytherin suites. Here, the changes were even more drastic. This time, the paint color scheme was a very pale mint green. The carpet was the same as with upstairs. The living room had become like a house common room with plenty of armchairs and love seats around, plus there were a few occasional tables here and there. The potions lab was now a private office. There was even a huge copy of the Marauders map on the wall where it could be seen from the big desk. Harry wondered how Frosty and Macy accomplished it. The armory was left alone to double up as private storage. What weapons remained in the other armory was also moved into here. The kitchen had been converted into two small bedrooms with a bed each and a shared ensuite. As above, a second door was located on the wall of what was the kitchen, siding on to the living common room to allow access to a toilet for anyone there. Downstairs in the twinned bedrooms, nothing much had changed, but both bathrooms had been modernized as with the Gryffindor master bedroom. Ensuite, the larger bedroom, which was once Salazar's, now had twin beds instead of the single. Combined, they now had sleeping arrangements for 6 singles or couples across 6 beds in 5 rooms. Harry and Daphne would sleep as a couple in the Gryffindor master bedroom, and Tracy would probably take the single bedroom that was the bedroom of Salazar's sister. That way she had her own bathroom. That left the double bedrooms on the same level as Tracy and the twinned bedrooms where the Slytherin kitchen was. Harry was thinking girl guests downstairs and boy guests up, but expected to be outvoted on any decision he made anyway. Returning to the Gryffindor now study area, Harry looked at Daphne and asked, "What do you think?" "It's perfect," she sighed. "I'm finally going to be out of that chilly snake pit and up somewhere where I'm going to be warm, and I'm going to be able to bring my best friend up here with me." She practically leapt at him and threw her arms around him, squealing with happiness. "I thought I was your best friend," Harry mock-pouted. "Don't be silly," she replied. "You're my husband. Tracy's my best friend." Harry laughed before he became playful. "Hey," he said, "want to go upstairs and give the master bed a workout?" Daphne blushed and exclaimed, "Merlin, you're a sex maniac, but yes, I want to do that." Laughing, he dragged her upstairs and declaimed, "Be aware, my lady, you're about to be ravished." Daphne squealed, ran to the bed, and threw herself upon it. "Well, my lord, are you going to ravish me or not?" Harry laughed and proceeded to disrobe while walking to the bed. During the last couple of weeks before school restarted, Harry visited with Headmaster Flitwick to ensure things were on track with his plans for the school. The headmaster and staff had been busy buying in new equipment and plants. The old school brooms had been ceremonially burned by Madam Hooch and Hagrid, and she happily accepted about 40 beginners' brooms, clean sweep teas. The T stood for trainer. Professor Sprout had managed to collect a great swag of seedlings and cuttings she'd always wanted, but could never afford. She'd called in Neville and a couple of her other favourite herbology students to help her set them all up. Neville had reported earlier by Owl that he was having a ball. The new professor for History of Magic, Professor Jones, had arrived quite early, according to Professor Flitwick. Harry hadn't had time to send Binns on his way, but ultimately he didn't need to. The new professor walked into the classroom, where Binns was in the process of teaching to an empty room, saw what the ghost was doing and said, "Stop! Who are you and why are you here?" asked Binns. "I'm your replacement," replied Professor Jones. "Oh, good," Binns apparently said. "It's about time you got here," and faded away. He'd not been seen since. Harry laughed when he'd heard that. "That's it?" he asked. "That's all it took?" "Apparently so," said the little professor, chuckling. Binns was just waiting for his replacement to turn up so he could leave. "Oh," he continued. Professor Jones was introduced to Hat and they spent about an hour chatting about history. It seems Hat is about to become Adjunct Professor Hat and will be teaching some classes." Harry grinned and said, "That's great, Professor," and turned to the Sorting Hat and said, "Congratulations, Hat." "Thank you, Lord Potter Slytherin Gryffindor," replied the Hat, a little smug about it all. Professor Badge had spent a month as a guest of the Grangers and had her eyes well and truly opened as to the reality of the Muggle world. She'd immediately returned to the castle and demanded 3 complete sets of the latest issue of the Muggles' Encyclopaedia Britannica be ordered and that they be replaced each time a new edition came out. She also ordered a book called How Stuff Works as her primary text for years 3rd through 5th, and a general science text for her newity classes. The old text was immediately tossed as being completely useless. She also brought back with her a small stack of books on astronomy and a decent-sized portable telescope. She and Professor Sinistra had spent an evening in the astronomy tower. The next morning they were down at breakfast demanding the school ream the brass telescope off the requirements list for students, and instead buy at least 40 because that's how many brooms were purchased of a certain type of Muggle telescope. They could not, in good faith, expect students to foot the bill for that sort of equipment. Madame Irma Pince was having a field day restocking her library, and had even opened the second section of the library that had not been opened for many a year. She had first come back with about 200 books, and was shocked when the headmaster asked if that was a sample. When she replied she thought it was already too much, he practically demanded she go spend at least 50,000. After that, books started arriving via fleur in crates. Each professor was also given a small fund of poicht or 1,500 and told to buy what books they specifically wanted for their field. They were also permitted to spend it on periodicals that related to their field. Any book any professor wanted specific to their chosen field was also added to the book list for Madame Pince to buy for the library to have at least one copy. The headmaster had also been working on who to bring in as heads of houses. So far, he thought he had the people he wanted, and they were due to start the next day. Just in case one or more didn't work out, he also had a list of candidates to replace them. Each was given a small office and bedroom attached via magic to the common rooms of each of the 4 houses. That way, a student could go see them at any time of the day or night. Professors Sprout, Babbling, Vector and Sinistra were all informed of the change to an individual head of house and were at first disappointed, even a little angry. However, when they learned that the new pay structure meant they'd not be losing any pay and would, however, increase their pay for the most part, they changed their attitudes. Only Professor Sprout was sad to lose the head of house role, and that was only because she'd been doing it for so long. Professor Denwoody was ambivalent to it all. However, the idea of having a near unlimited budget for her potions laboratory made her happy. Her only real request was to move the laboratory out of the dungeon, which Professor Flitwick was more than happy to allow. As he had stated at the outset, Professor Duncan would not be returning for the 1995-96 school year. And the headmaster had been having difficulties finding a suitable replacement. 2 days before the Hogwarts Express was due to leave King's Cross, he dropped a bombshell. The ministry had enacted an old decree which stated if the headmaster could not find a replacement for a vacant slot on the teaching roster by the day before school was due to start, the Wizarding Examinations Authority would have to step in and appoint such a person. In the end, Professor Duncan changed his mind and agreed to return so long as Harry would also be an adjunct professor for Dada and assist him in some classes. Plus, he'd heard of the curse on the position, who really hadn't, and wanted curse breakers brought in to, if nothing else, check. Harry agreed, and Professor Flitwick contacted the goblins, who would send a team of curse breakers over to check for the curse. Actually, Professor, said Harry, thinking about it, get them to do a scan of the entire castle. Who knows what's been cast and yet lingers inside these walls over the past millennia. I'll contact them this very afternoon and ask they put a priority on it, replied the professor. Do you mind if I tell them it's a special request of yourself? Not at all, replied Harry. I don't mind my name being used for something that concerns the safety of our children, like this. Something Harry struggled with was the decision with what to wear as a student. His fallback was to remain wearing Ravenclaw students' robes. However, he felt he needed something a little different, as he was also Lord Gryffindor and Lord Slytherin. When he asked Daphne for advice, she immediately dragged him off to her favorite designer. The designer, a flouncy wizard given to making many gestures with his hands and an odd speaking affectation, declared it a most interesting challenge he was eager to sink his teeth into. After many designs, some so over the top they challenged Dumbledore's own dress sense, let alone Lockhart's, Harry and Daphne were finally able to whittle it down to one. His school robes would be of the same style as all other male students, but the Ravenclaw trim would be very muted. His overrobe would not have the dark blue inner lining, instead it would be black. There would be no color trim on his jumpers, and his tie would be the plain black Hogwarts tie. The Ravenclaw badge on his overrobes would remain on the left while he would wear the twin Gryffindor and Slytherin crests on the right, but shrunk down with a gold surround. As a style, it clearly marked him as a student, but dramatically removed him from being just a Ravenclaw student. He also had a set of under-uniforms made that he could wear under his school overrobe, which removed him as a student. These underrobes were straight black with a jacket, rather than a V-neck school jumper. If he was in a hurry, he could leave the grey school slacks on and just change from the waist up. He was hoping changing wasn't going to be a problem, though, with his and Daphne's suite being accessed from the very handy third floor, especially if he was also going to be an adjunct professor of defense against the dark arts. He ordered sufficient of both styles and had them owl-delivered to Potter Manor with plenty of time to spare. For Daphne, he told her to choose what she wanted to wear. She was, after all, Lady Slytherin and Lady Gryffindor, besides being Lady Potter. Daphne decided on sticking with the standard school uniform for female students, but added a gold surround to the Slytherin crest. On the right she wore a much smaller Gryffindor crest, also with the gold surround. I want to show that I'm not just a Slytherin student, she'd explained. Wearing the Gryffindor crest also shows I'm open to students of that house to recognize me as being of that house. Harry liked it and supported her decision. Finally, the 1st of September was back upon them. Harry and Daphne made arrangements with Petey and Ninny to move their entire wardrobes to Hogwarts, since they had the room in their new suite and sent their student equipment direct. Basically, they didn't need their trunks at all. Instead, Harry carried a small overnight bag that contained the uniforms for both he and Daphne to change into on the train. Harry arranged for both of them to flew to Greengrass Estate and joined Isabel and Astoria for the trip to the station. They left early to be there in plenty of time. On arriving on the platform and walking towards the owner's carriage, Harry could see a few students and parents trying their damnedest to get into it. "Excuse me," he called, walking up to the door with Daphne on his arm. "Do you mind?" "What is this, Potter?" sneered Malfoy. "Ah," said Harry. "It's the owner's carriage, Malfoy. In other words, mine." Malfoy held up his hand, showing the ring of the House of Malfoy. "It's Lord Malfoy, Potter," he sneered. "And it's Lord Potter Slytherin Gryffindor, Malfoy," Harry sneered right back. "As I used to tell Dumbledore, if you're not willing to use my title, don't bitch and whine when I don't use yours. Now, why are you attempting to enter my carriage without permission?" Malfoy struck his pure-blood lord pose and said, "On my father's passing, I have become a governor on the school board, therefore this carriage should be for me and my friends." "Nah," said Harry, understanding. "I knew there was something I meant to do during the break. I was just a bit busy getting married, enjoying my honeymoon, and discussing the future of the school with Headmaster Flitwick. Draco Malfoy, as I am owner of Hogwarts, and as you are, apparently according to you, on the school board, you're fired. As a matter of fact, the entire school board of governors is fired. Now please step away, so I may escort my lady onto the train." "What?" he spluttered. "You can't do that. The positions on the school board are hereditary. It's my birthright." "No, they're not," said Harry, with no small amount of exasperation. "The school charter specifically states the positions on the school board of governors are by appointment only, and at the direction of the owners. As I am the owner, my direction is the entire school board of governors is fired. Now, again, please step away from the door so I may escort my lady on board." Malfoy and his cronies stepped away, but Harry could see they were up to something. Was that anticipation in the blonde ferret's eyes, perhaps? They only backed up a few feet to allow room. They certainly didn't move away. Walking up to the door, Harry turned to Malfoy and said, "The carriage is blood-warded, so you cannot enter. However, as both Lord Gryffindor and Lord Slytherin, I can." Harry then reached over and grasped the door handle, while Daphne surreptitiously, with her hand behind her leg, dropped her wand into her hand. With a twist, he opened the door and held it open for Daphne to board, which she did, backwards. A bare second after Harry opened the door, Malfoy's face twisted in fury. He whipped his wand out and raised it. "Sectum Sepra," the blonde boy bellowed. The spellfire hit a shield, while no one was watching. As soon as Daphne saw Malfoy draw his wand, she was casting a shield before Harry. Malfoy's spell struck with a sickly purple gash of light. Harry reached out, grabbed Malfoy's wand, and yanked it out of the boy's hand to the boy's dumbfounded shock. He slipped the wand into his pocket, took another half-pace forward, and full backhanded the still gaping mouth before him. Malfoy went down. A small crowd had gathered and were speaking in shocked voices, but no one stepped forth to stop matters. "Duca Lucius Malfoy," barked Harry, "you have attempted to curse myself, Lord Slytherin, the lord of your house. You will be suitably dealt with during the sorting feast tonight. Now board the train, find a vacant compartment, and stay silent until I call upon you during the feast." Malfoy glared at Harry as he struggled to his feet. Once he'd regained his feet, he hesitated a moment before he stuck his hand out at Harry. "My wand," he snarled. "You are utterly incapable of being trusted with it," said Harry. "I will hold it on my person until I deal with you during the sorting feast. Now, get your ass on the train in one of the students' carriages." With a sigh of disappointment, Harry entered the open door of the owner's carriage to be met with a snogging from Daphne. The boy slunk away, casting muttered aspersions at Harry as he did so. His little posse of bootlickers followed along. "Thanks for the shield, Daff," he said, once he'd pulled away. "I know Malfoy's modus operandi," she shrugged. "I knew exactly when he was likely to attempt to curse you. It was always going to be a couple of seconds after you tried the door handle, and you weren't shocked from it." Harry pulled from his robes 3 new signs. He placed one on each of the 3 doors they'd be using, one at each of the 2 station side doors, and a different one in the intercarriage connection door. The one for the platform side doors read, "Lord Harry James Potter Slytherin Gryffindor. If you seek audience, knock, and his personal guests only. Do not touch the door handle. The one for the intercarriage connection door read, Lord Harry James Potter Slytherin Gryffindor, and his personal guests only. Private carriage. Knock. To not touch the door handle. Not for inspection by prefects. All three signs were surmounted by the triple crests of Potter, Slytherin and Gryffindor. Do you think they'll work? Asked a quite amused Lady Greengrass Potter, watching Harry affix the last one. Not a chance, he chuckled. However, I've not put them up to stop people trying. I've put them up so I can slap them down for it once we get to the castle. Harry laughed. Ah, said Daphne, understanding. How very Slytherin of you. All students are hereby informed the last carriage on the Hogwarts Express is a private carriage. No student, including prefects, is to attempt to enter the carriage without the express permission of the owner, Lord Harry James Potter Slytherin Gryffindor. One of the things Harry had the deputy headmistress include with the list of book lists each student was sent was an appended note that read, just as with the engine, prefect's duties do not include inspecting this private carriage. Once they'd checked out the carriage to ensure all was as it should be, Harry and Daphne disembarked and awaited their friends on the platform. Of course, the note was signed by Headmaster Flitwick. The two watched amused as a couple of people, including parents, ignored the sign and attempted to open the door. Their yelps of startled pain had the newlyweds snickering behind their hands. Some attempted to look in through the windows, but magic prevented anyone from being able to look within, which is probably why many tried the door. That no one knocked was unsurprising. Merlin, most witches and wizards are daft, muttered Harry as yet another got zapped and yelped. First of their friends to arrive was Blaise, alone. Then came Tracy, accompanied by her mother, Petra, quickly followed by Susan and Hannah, arriving with Hannah's parents, Michael and Eliza. Hermione came through the barrier not too much later, and she'd managed to find Luna on the way. Then Neville arrived via side along with his gran. Harry stared back at her in shock for a few moments before he snorted and hugged her. Never change, dear Luna, never change. Luna walked over to him and said, Hello, Professor Potter. Married life seems to be treating you well. With everyone now arrived, Harry led them to the carriage. People naturally stepped out of the way, and he opened the door. Blaise immediately stepped through and waited while Harry and Neville fed through the trunks of their friends. Hmm? Asked Harry. Lord Potter? Asked one of the adult witches, standing nearby and watching. This carriage is yours? She asked. This carriage is the private carriage of the rightful heirs of the four founders, he explained, knowing others were listening in. As I'm the rightful heir of two of the founders, specifically Gryffindor and Slytherin, it could be assumed it's my carriage, yes. May we have a look? She asked. He mused. Turning to look at Blaise, he said, Blaise, would you mind awfully going and opening the door at the other end for people to exit? I'll let them in through this end. Indicating the door, Harry looked at the witch and said, Ma'am? With a nod, Blaise grinned and said, Sure, and he marched off to the other end of the carriage, ready to let people out. With a wide smile, she said, Thank you, my lord, and hopped aboard. Daphne and the others also entered to ensure things weren't touched. After the older witch boarded, a line quickly formed of those others standing around, and one after the other, they filed on board. Harry was keeping a close watch at the other door and was only allowing a dozen Gawkers on at a time. They even had students coming along to have a look. When the first witch through exited, she came back over to Harry and said, Thank you, my lord. It is most impressive. Harry smiled in response and gave a slight nod in acceptance. After a few minutes, the amazing bouncing ferret and his cronies came back. Potter, he sneered, you're letting people on board? I thought you said it was a private carriage. It is, Malfoy, said Harry. However, people with better manners than you asked to have a look. You should try asking sometime, Malfoy. You'll be amazed at the way people treat you when you do. For a moment, Harry thought the boy was actually going to ask. Instead, he just sneered again and stormed off, minions in tow. Chuckling to himself, Harry just watched him go. Arrogant little git, isn't he? Asked some wizard Harry hadn't met before, who was about to hop on board. Harry shrugged and said, He is a product of his upbringing. I doubt he'll ever change now. When the 5-minute whistle sounded, Harry said, "I'm afraid that's going to have to be it for this trip, folks. However, we'll try to do this again for the trip after Christmas." Once the crowds dispersed, he boarded. About to close the door, he saw the Weasley brood come rushing in through the barrier. After a quick wave to their mother, Fred and George came running pell-mell down the platform, pushing a cart with their trunks on it. He got back a little good-natured whinging, but everyone was otherwise happy. Laughing at them, Harry held the door open as they tossed their trunks in and jumped inside, slamming the door shut behind them. "I think the Weasley family is utterly incapable of arriving at the platform before the 5-minute whistle is sounded," he laughed. "There's a 5-minute whistle?" asked one of the twins. "No one told us that," said the other. After letting the last Gawker off at the other end of the carriage, Blaise came back and said, "I need to get changed. I have to rush up to the prefect's carriage for the prefect's meeting." "Blaise, old chap," exclaimed one of the twins. "What are you saying? Are you, perchance—" "I, prefect," they exclaimed in mock horror, together. "I am," he grinned, going to his trunk to pull out his robes. "Me too," said Susan. "And me," said a proud Hermione. "And me," blushed Neville. "And me," said Tracy finally. "Sweet Merlin," exclaimed one twin. "We're surrounded by a perfect of prefects." "That's a good one," said the other to his brother. "Thank you," said the first, a bit smugly. "And what about you, Harry? Are you a perfect too?" "No," he replied. "I'm going to be way too busy being the owner." Blaise and Neville had collected their robes and went to change in the boys' change room, while Tracy, Hermione and Susan changed in the girls' change room. Together the 5 left to head to the front of the train just after it pulled out of the station. This time, they weren't bothered by students, including prefects, trying to come into the carriage. The only knocks on the door they got were from their friends returning from the prefect's meeting at the other end of the train, and when they each returned from their patrols. As she and Neville didn't have the first patrol, when Hermione returned, she told Harry, "We reminded the others that the owner's carriage was off limits," she said. "The new head boy is a Slytherin, Miles Bletchley." He wasn't too happy to be reminded of that. However, he and the new head girl did make sure the other prefects were aware not to attempt to enter here. However, they did hear one yelp. Harry assumed it was someone who didn't realize they were about to try to enter the last carriage. Both he and Daphne made sure they were all aware of the password, "Courage Under Fire," to get into the Gryffindor owner's suite, and they were all invited to drop by at any time. "Just don't enter the private bedrooms if the door is closed, lest you receive first-hand knowledge of the beauty of the act of reproduction," he said. To which Daphne squealed and blushed, before smacking his arm in embarrassment. The others laughed. When Harry changed, he changed into his adjunct professor uniform. "Harry, what are you wearing?" asked Hermione, always eager for new information. "It's a surprise, Hermione," he replied with a smile. "You'll find out when we sit for the feast." She pouted a little at not being immediately informed, but was apparently prepared to wait. Walking in through the main doors at the castle and into the great hall, Harry was about to head to the Ravenclaw table after a chaste kiss to the cheek of his wife, when he remembered that wasn't where he was going to be sitting for the feast. He turned away and walked up onto the dais and around the head table, taking seat at one of the lesser professor's spots on the Slytherin end. A few students saw him sit there and looked at him with curiosity written all over their faces. It was only Malfoy who snarked about it. "Potter, what do you think you're doing?" "It's Professor Potter, Mr. Malfoy," he flatly replied. "Now, go sit down before you become the first student of the year to lose both house points and earn a detention." "That's the way," Professor Denwadi murmured to him. "Show your authority right from the get-go." He smiled back at the potion's mistress. "He's the most troublesome one," he murmured back. "He constantly makes himself a perfect patsy for me by opening his mouth before he engages his brain. I really should be grateful to him." She actually smiled back and acknowledged his remark with a slight nod. With the student body, less the first years, finally sitting, Headmaster Flitwick stood on his chair and called for quiet. When he had it, he called to Professor McGonagall, who Harry had invited back to the deputy headmistress slot after Professor Sprout was adamant in not taking it, to bring in the new first years. She walked out the doors and returned a few minutes later, leading the new ickle firsties. As always, there was lots of fearful looking around as they followed the professor up the aisle. With her usual efficiency, she had them arrayed before the head table and the hat sitting on its stool. The hat, recognizing its moment, then broke into song. It was one of unity and respect across the houses. Harry chuckled when it finished with, "For the first time, history when it comes to that. I'm adjunct Professor Sorting Hat." Harry heard Professor Jones, the new history of magic professor, from 2 seats down harumph and mutter, "Smart-ass piece of cloth," and giggled as Professor Denwoody looked affronted at the man. Thankfully, his remark and Harry's subsequent giggling was drowned out by the applause to anyone but the few close by. The sorting started with Ewan Abercrombie heading for Gryffindor and continued apace with the last, Rose Zeller, heading for Hufflepuff. With the sorting finished, Professor McGonagall moved the stool to the side of the room, but placed Hat on the end of the table opposite Harry. Clearly, this was to show Hat as now being a recognized member of staff, subtle but effective. Headmaster Flitwick then rose to address the student body. "For those new to Hogwarts, welcome. For those returning, welcome back. First, I shall cover some major changes that have occurred since you were here last." Professor Flitwick covered the new positions of head of houses being unique positions, then introduced the 4 ladies who now held those positions. Their titles would be Madam, and he next publicly welcomed back Professor McGonagall to the position of Deputy Headmistress. Then he told the students Professor Binns had finally moved on to his next great adventure, which made the entire student population happy, except for those who grieved the loss of their nap time, and introduced Professor Jones to the position of Professor of History. He then said Professor Duncan, as Data Professor, had chosen to remain after all, and that a curse that affected the position had been found and removed. Harry had earlier learned the curse actually did exist, and that it was tied to the office of the Data Professor and anchored to Riddle's school award. The goblins simply removed the award and destroyed it, thus removing the curse. Next he moved on to Harry. "In days, many years past, now," he began, "we once had adjunct professors serving here. An adjunct professor is a professor who works part-time in that role, but still retains all the authority of a full-time professor. That position has been reactivated. Our first adjunct professor in many a year is our very own Mr. Potter. Adjunct Professor Potter will be assisting Professor Jones in defense against the dark arts, and occasionally Professor Wiblin in charms." That had a fair few of the students chatting among themselves. Harry looked over and saw Hermione staring back at him, apparently gobsmacked, while Neville was grinning his head off. Looking at the Slytherin table, he saw Malfoy staring at him. Flushed with a look of utter loathing, he chose to ignore it. For the time being, Daphne and Tracy were also grinning. Letting the students settle again, the headmaster then said, "And finally, though he's already let the cat out of the bag, I introduce Adjunct Professor Sorting Hat. Professor Hat will be assisting Professor Jones in imparting to you the true history of the school and much of magical Britain instead of the nonsense you've read in some texts. He, after all, has lived through it since the time of the founders. That's staffing. Now I have news concerning equipment within the school." He told them of the new brooms, the much expanded library, the new telescopes, though did not mention they were of Muggle manufacture, the wider selection of plants within the greenhouses, and the changes to some of the curriculum, especially in Muggle studies. Through the very generous donation of the owners of the school, Lord and Lady Potter, the school currently finds itself flush with extra galleons. If you have an idea where we can spend some of that gold, please advise your new heads of house. They will bring it to the senior staff where it will be given well-reasoned consideration. To give you time to absorb all that new and wonderful information, I now call on our industrious elves to serve our feast." He gave a double clap of his hands, and the tables filled with food as he sat down again. As he ate, Harry engaged in polite and jovial conversation with those staff members sitting close by, and also kept shifting his eyes back towards the students. He finally caught the eye of Susan and Hannah, and they both grinned at him. When he turned to look at Luna, she seemed to realize he was looking at her. She turned to him and waved with a big smile. Both Professors Denwaddy and Jones wanted to know why he was an adjunct professor while still a student, so explained the arrangement he had with Professor Duncan and Headmaster Flitwick concerning the role. He also explained how he had temporarily filled the role as unofficial adjunct professor of charms to teach the senior years the Patronus charm. When the meal was finally cleared away, Professor Flitwick once more stood to address the students. As always, the Forbidden Forest is forbidden, unless you are accompanied by a member of staff. The list of banned items, as always, is available to all from Caretaker Filch, and is affixed to his office door. This year it is my sad duty to officially inform you of the passing of Albus Dumbledore. For some, he shall be missed. The headmaster's words were quite telling. He wasn't mentioned as a previous headmaster or professor. He didn't say he was sad, but said it was his sad duty, and he said the man would be missed by some. Now I call on the owner of our school, who is also adjunct Professor Potter, Lord Potter Slytherin Gryffindor, to say a few words. That's twice he's mentioned me as the owner, thought Harry, as he rose to move out to the front. Professor Flitwick returned to sitting in his chair. "Good evening," said Harry. Mimicking Professor Snape's style, he kept his voice quiet but projected. He used his magic to project his voice just a little. It kept everyone quiet to listen. For those who missed the announcement at the leaving feast last year, or failed to read the news in the Daily Prophet soon afterwards, I am Lord Harry James Potter Slytherin Gryffindor. It is why I wear the crests of those two houses upon my robes, and why they are surrounded by a gold border. He indicated them. I am also a student in Ravenclaw House. He indicated that on his robes. You may address me as Lord Potter for matters relating to the school administration, Professor Potter, when I'm teaching, or Mr. Potter when I'm sitting in a class being taught. If you make a mistake, don't worry about it. It confuses me at times too. For my friends, by invitation, you may address me as Harry. You may not address me in any other fashion. He dropped his voice an octave and firmly said, that includes just Potter, Scarhead, or other insulting terms. Lifting his pitch back up, he continued, I do not like bullies. Most of you are already well aware of that fact. I especially do not like bullies who pick on those younger than them, or those who bully by gathering unto themselves minions or lickspittles. To bully by superior numbers, I think them cowards. All. As of right now, the terms mudblood, and any derivative of that foul word, and blood traitor, are hereby banned for anywhere on the school property, including aboard the Hogwarts Express, unless they are used by someone like Professor Jones to demonstrate the stupidity of pure-blood supremacy. I am Lord Gryffindor, and I am Lord Slytherin. As such, I own this rock pile known as the Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry. That means, within these grounds, and upon the Hogwarts Express, if I will it, so will it be. As per the old ways, I am the Lord of the Manor. If you do not like that, if you cannot accept that, he pointed at the doors back out to the entrance hall, there's the door, leave. I am also married. I now introduce my lovely wife, Lady Daphne Ophelia Greengrass Potter. Daphne rose in place. Though she has chosen not to use the names Gryffindor or Slytherin in her title, she is nevertheless also Lady Slytherin and Lady Gryffindor. You will accord her the same respect as I demand, lest you experience my ire. He then bowed to Daphne and said, Thank you, my lady. Daphne gave a slight curtsy and retook her seat. As we are married, and as we are Lord and Lady Gryffindor and Slytherin, we have taken up residence in the Gryffindor and Slytherin owners' suites. You will find the entrance to them on the 3rd floor, near the entrance to the infirmary, behind the portrait of the Griffin. If you need to see us, and we're in our private apartments, you'll find a flat mirror next to the portrait. Just announce yourself to that, and you will be attended. We are both students commencing our Audiobook year. As such, we are already going to be quite busy. Add to that our need to attend matters relating to the administration of the school, the Wizengamot, and our 5 houses. We're going to be extremely busy. If you have a complaint on something related to the school, you'd best make it to one of the staff in the first instance, else you'll be given short shrift. That aside, we're still approachable. If you see us out and about, by all means, approach us if you wish. We'd hate to be thought snotty or snooty. We do not put on the la-da-da airs of those who feel insecure in their place within our society. We want you to be happy here and to feel secure. After all, while this is Daphne's and my home, it's your home too for 8 months of the year. Now, if Headmaster Flitwick has nothing else to inform you, he looked at the headmaster, who smiled and shook his head in response, before he turned back. Then it's night time, you were all abed. Don't forget to be down early for breakfast, so your heads of house can hand you your class schedules. Classes will start immediately after breakfast. Prefects, please escort our new first years to their dormitories. To you all, good night, and I wish you sweet dreams. Off you trot. As the student body rose as one and began to chat among themselves, and the prefects corralled the first years for their houses, Harry turned back to the staff. I didn't overdo it, did I? He grinned. Headmaster Flitwick chuckled and shook his head as Professor McGonagall smiled back. No, said the little headmaster, you had them, enraptured. Harry shrugged and said, believe it or not, that style I used was something I learned from Professor Snape's manner of speaking to an audience. He may have been a dreadful teacher, but he sure knew how to capture the attention of an audience. That he did, sighed Professor McGonagall. That he did. Daphne and Tracy waited for him. Then together they made their way to the owner's suites. How do you ladies think I did with that little speech? He asked. You did very well, Harry, said Daphne. You held everyone's attention right, though, said Tracy. I don't know if that's because you spoke clearly but softly, or whether they were in awe of the one who killed Voldemort, or it was because you were radiating power. It worked. As Harry approached, the portrait slid aside, and they climbed the half-flight to enter the Gryffindor portion of the joined suites. Both Frosty and Maisie popped in and welcomed them. After they both greeted their suite's elves, Daphne grabbed Tracy's hand and turned to Harry. You go make sure everything's sorted where we want it. I'm taking Tracy down to see her room and make sure her stuff's in there. Harry held up both hands in mock surrender and said, Yes, my lady. Behave you, she growled as Tracy giggled, and was dragged down the joining passage to the Slytherin section. Harry smiled after them before climbing the half-flight to their bedroom. Inside, he quickly checked the walk-in robes and the bathroom. Everything was set up as they liked. He suspected Petey and Ninny's elvish hands in that. Their nightclothes were laid out on their turned-down bed. With a nod of satisfaction, Harry headed back downstairs to check out the rest of the place and to meet up with Daphne and Tracy. He met them in the living room in the Slytherin area. You like? He asked Tracy. I love, she gushed, giving him a hug. Your stuff in your room? He asked. Pulling back, and with tears in her eyes, she nodded. Good, he said. Now, you know how to call on the 2 elves that take care of us. In here, you're welcome to call on them if you need anything. And what if I would like to have a guest? She blushed and dropped her eyes. This is your home away from home, Tracy, he replied. If you have guests, I won't mind. No, she said. I mean, interrupting, Daphne smirked and said, she means if she wants to have a boyfriend spend the night in her room with her. Not clueless, but wanting to tweak his Slytherin friend, he said, Oh, you mean if you want to bring some poor unsuspecting male in here and screw his brains out? Gah, she exclaimed, turning bright red. That is, of course, unless you've decided to beat for the other team and you want to bring a female in here. Harry, exclaimed Daphne, also blushing a little. Sure, he simply said. You're old enough to make that sort of decision on your own. I'm not your father or head of house, so it's none of my concern if you want to make some bloke's dream come true and fuck him senseless. Harry, squealed Daphne, again. Tracy just blushed even deeper and appeared unable to voice a response. Looking at Tracy, he calmly said, If you want to entertain a friend overnight, you have my permission to bring them here. Is that better? Okay, he said. I'll be good. Slowly calming down again, she eventually nodded her head and looked him in the eye. Thank you, she quietly said. No problem, he said. Just make sure you have suitable silencing charms in place. I don't want to hear you howling out my name during any of your long bouts of ecstasy. I mean, that is, of course, if he's good enough. She gaped back at him in dawning horror before another flush darkened her skin. Harry, Daphne squealed again at a higher volume. Next thing he knew, stinging hexes were being cast in his direction. With a couple of yelps of pain, he bolted back upstairs to the master bedroom, trying not to laugh between getting shot. Next morning, Harry was dressed in his student robes and escorting both girls down to breakfast in the Great Hall. Though they could have had breakfast in the owners' suites, Harry and Daphne both needed to show they were just as much students as owners. They were the first of their friends to arrive and sat in the middle of the Ravenclaw table to await them. They'd already started on their breakfasts as the others started turning up. Neville, ever the gentleman, assisted Hermione into her seat opposite. Sitting himself, he casually asked, "How'd you sleep?" "Sleep?" asked Harry, before he looked like he knew what Neville was getting at. "Oh, right. That's the other thing you do in a bed, right?" Neville looked back, stunned into immobility, as Hermione exclaimed, "Harry," while Daphne just reached across and smacked him up the back of his head. "Don't mind him," she blandly said to them both. "He's been like this since last night. I think he's trying to be, funny." Neville finally got his brain back into gear and snorted in amusement and continued to load his plate with eggs and bacon. "Hey, that's not fair," he pouted. "We don't even have a couch. We have armchairs and love seats, not couches." Turning back to Harry, she growled, "You behave or you're sleeping on the couch tonight." "I'm sure Frosty can find one somewhere," she sniffed. Hermione tittered at their byplay. "And you, Lady Hermione," said Harry, wanting to get off the subject of couches very quickly. "How was your time with the Bulgarian? Or should I say the Bulgarian?" "Victor was the perfect gentleman," she huffed. "In other words," he retorted, "you didn't get lucky." Hermione harumphed and threw a breakfast pastry at him, while Neville tried to hide his snickering. Dropping into place next to Tracy, Blaise asked, "Hey folks, what are we talking about?" "Whether or not Hermione got lucky with Crumb," Neville replied with a straight face. Hermione's head snapped around to look at the boy, while also looking like she'd just been stabbed in the back. Harry just burst out laughing, which earned him another smack in the back of the head, and Blaise looked astonished at the answer. "Pardon," he stuttered. "Harry's being crude, and it looks like he's infected Neville with the same stupidity," replied Tracy, glaring at Neville. Neville at least had the decency to look abashed. Not Harry, though. After that, with the arrival of Susan and Hannah, Harry decided to behave himself. Luna was the last to arrive. He already knew that, if he tried to go toe-to-toe with being the most crude with Luna, he'd lose. It took a while, but the denizens of the school finally came to accept that the heir to two of the founders was actually a student with them, and one in the midst of his OWL year. It's not that Luna was deliberately being crude, either. She just didn't have a bar to cross for what was considered decent discussion topics. And not if Harry wanted to talk about a woman's hygiene issues, for instance. Luna would happily chat away about them. But if Harry used an impolite term, Luna would frown at him and tell him off for being rude. To try and embarrass her, one time he asked her about her knowledge and experience of blowjobs. She calmly discussed what she knew the term to mean, wondered about how, for her part, she'd overcome the gag reflex, wanted to know the truth about actual lengths expected in erect penises of boys her own age, and about how a boy would perform such a feat on a girl. She'd even asked Harry, if he wouldn't mind, of course, taking his penis out of his robes and getting it erect for her. She even offered to assist him in getting it erect, so she could see one for herself, a request Harry politely refused while madly blushing. "But why?" he practically cried. "I only get 1 year as captain, and this is it. You can't quit on me." One of the first things Harry felt he had to do was tell new Ravenclaw Quidditch captain, Roger Davies, he was withdrawing from the Quidditch team. The boy looked like someone had killed his familiar, the way he acted. "Roger, I have to," Harry replied with an exasperated sigh. "I'm in my OWL year, I have 4 ancient houses to look after, I have Wizengamot issues to deal with, I have to deal with admin issues with the school. I'm recently married, and, to top it all off, I'm an adjunct professor and am required to teach classes. I just can't spend time playing Quidditch." "On top of that," he quickly said before the boy could interrupt, I've also had to give up my favorite activity, running the etiquette club with my wife. Thankfully, my friend Neville Longbottom has stepped forward to take my place. But that among all the things I've had to give up hurts me the most. And if there was one activity I'd take back if I could, it would be that not Quidditch. The boy left, most upset, but Harry eventually promised to help him find a replacement. He just couldn't stay on as Seeker. Harry was also visited by a small delegation of Slytherins who were upset at what they perceived as unjust treatment by the potions professor, potions mistress Dinwiddie. Harry's first question to them was, "Have you taken this to your head of house?" "No, I consider myself the lord of your house, your head of house, for the purposes of looking after the students within that house, is Madam Winthorpe. It's her job to hear these complaints, as it's part of what she's specifically paid to do. If she determines there's any validity to your complaint, she takes it to the headmaster in the first instance." "Not me." "But you're our head of house," one spluttered. "Only when the headmaster deems it an issue he is unable to deal with, or you're unhappy with his determination, should you even think about bringing it to me. Do you understand?" After a little grumbling, their spokesperson said, "Yes, Lord Slytherin, thank you." "You're welcome," he replied. "Just make sure of the validity and logical reasoning of your complaint before you take it to Madam Winthorpe." Besides that one instance, the Slytherins, for the most part, got over their initial anger and curiosity and settled down. However, they were quite shocked when one day, out of the blue, Harry simply walked into their common room. One of the female sixth years looked oddly at him and asked, "How did you get in here, my lord?" "How did you know the password?" she asked. Harry smirked and said, "Really, Miss Baddock, have you forgotten already that I'm Lord Slytherin? There is nowhere in the castle I cannot go if I wish to so go there, and that's especially apt for this common room." "I don't need one," he replied. "Passworded doors automatically open for me as I approach." "All of them?" she asked in surprise. "All of them," he smiled. "This is my home, Miss Baddock. Did you really think I'd be unable to get into anywhere within my own home?" No," she replied with a slight blush. "I guess I just hadn't thought of it like that." She nodded back before she asked, "And what brings you to our common room, Lord Slytherin?" He gave a slight nod and said, "That's because you're only thinking of Hogwarts as a school. Instead, try to think of it as someone's home that hosts a school. And that someone is me. Then, shall you be on the right track?" She nodded back before she asked, "And what brings you to our common room, Lord Slytherin?" With a nod and smile at her words, he said, "Now you're getting it. Actually, I'm just here because I was out for a walk and became curious. After all, you're in my house, well, one of my houses, and I felt I should at least pay a visit. If only so people don't think I'm being rude and ignoring them, you understand." She smiled back with a very small bob that could, if one was to stretch the definition, be considered a curtsy. "Then welcome," she said. He was just smirking back when Malfoy entered. "What are you doing here, Potter?" Quick as a flash, Harry had his wand out and, with a quick cast, had the blonde git slammed up against and pinned to a wall. "Mr. Malfoy," Harry glared at him, with his magic amped up and swirling about. "Obviously, my little talk at the opening feast either didn't make it through the sludge in your ears to your brain, or it promptly leaked back out again. I am Lord Slytherin, you ignorant little shit," he sneered. "Firstly, 50 points from Slytherin for your disrespect of a professor. Secondly, 2 weeks' detention at the hands of our caretaker, Mr. Filch. Thirdly, your first warning of only 2 allowed you before I expel you from this castle." "Take heed, Mr. Malfoy," Harry, almost leisurely, strode up to him. "I took out the dork lard who called himself Voldemort while surrounded by 16 of his inner circle masked morons, one of which was your father and another your godfather. An insignificant little gnat like you, I normally cannot even be bothered acknowledging. However, you are more and more popping into my thoughts, and they're not nice ones. If you are unable to grasp that simple fact, I will not hesitate to smack you silly in public to such a degree. The name Malfoy will be used as a point of derision from that point forth. You'll have to take your family to the mainland to escape it all. What do you think of these examples?" Ah, look at that idiot. He's such a Malfoy. Or, Merlin, I got that so wrong. I thought a Malfoy must have snuck into my bloodline, or he was so stupid he made a Malfoy look smart. All good examples, don't you think? Still pinned to the wall, Malfoy just glared back, furious. Don't make me expend the energy to deal with you, Mr. Malfoy. Your precious dork lard only took me 3 spells to kill. You're such a mediocre wizard, I doubt I'd need more than one, for you. With that, Harry spun about and stormed from the room. As he passed out of the hidden entrance, Malfoy was released from the sticking charm and slid down the wall to land in an ungraceful heap at the bottom of it. The head boy, Miles Bletchley, from where he was standing near the door leading to the boys' dorm rooms, sneered at the git and said, "Malfoy, you're such a Malfoy." A couple of the younger years, who'd had to put up with the git prancing about and ordering others around as if he was the Prince of Slytherin, openly snickered. On his next wanderings, he decided to give the Gryffindor rooms a quick visit. As he walked up to the portrait of the one the Griffs called the Fat Lady, he said, "Hello, Agatha." "My lord," she said with a curtsy. "Open up for me, please," he said. "Of course, my lord," she said with another curtsy as the portrait swung open. He stepped up and through the round portrait hole and into the common room. Looking around, ignoring those within for the moment, he thought, how in Merlin's name are people supposed to think in here? Red and gold are not colours conducive to a peaceful environment. One of the lions in the room, Katie Bell, rose with a cheeky grin, curtsied and said, "My Lord Gryffindor, you honour us." Harry burst out laughing and with a bit of a wave-off gesture said, "Oh, gee whiz. Gosh darn and all." She grinned back and came up to give him a hug. "How are you doing, Harry?" she asked. "Good, actually," he said, releasing her to step back to arm's length. "How goes it with you?" "Thankful I'm past my Audiobook and have until next year before undertaking my newts," she replied. "What brings you here?" "Well," he began, "I was having a bit of an idea. You see, red and gold aren't exactly good colors for a relaxing environment. So I was thinking of mixing them together and making it a bit of a pastel. How does it sound to you if I set up this area with an orange decor? Perhaps burnt umber?" Looking back at him a bit horrified, she exclaimed, "No." "I think it's a great idea," said Ron Weasley, from where he was sitting playing chess with Seamus Finnegan. "It'll be just like the Chudley Cannons." "No," she exclaimed, again, after glaring at the red-headed boy. "Just no." Harry couldn't help himself. He started giggling before letting it out in a full-throated laugh. Stepping forward and hugging the girl again, he said, "Never fear, Katie dear. I'm kidding." With a cry of Harry coming from the stairs that led to the girls' dorms, Harry was grapple-hugged by the brunette-haired missile of Astoria, who charged him. "What brings you here?" she asked as she stepped back again. Over the past few years, Astoria had changed from the knobbly-kneed, gawky 9-year-old he first met into a svelte, willowy young woman that turned heads wherever she went. "Hey," he said mock-hurt, "I can't come and visit my favorite little sister?" "You've never come before," she said, not in the least affected by his shenanigans. "Why are you really here?" "True," he sighed and stood up straighter. "I'm here because I was curious. It's been a while since I was in here last and wanted to see it again. Besides, as Lord Gryffindor, I really should visit more often." "Yes, you should," she said with a cocked eyebrow and little moo. "I am supposed to be your favorite little sister after all." Harry grinned and stepped over to her, giving her a hug. "And don't you forget that," he said. Pulling away just slightly, he asked, "Still dating Colin?" She blushed and pulled back before looking down and nodding. "Is he behaving himself?" he asked. With a sly smile, she blushed even deeper before nodding again. "Good," he simply stated. "I'd hate to have to give the boy the shovel talk." Katie asked. "The what talk?" "The shovel talk," Harry said, turning to her. When he saw the look of confusion on her face, he whisked out a quill from an inner pocket of his robes and transfigured it into a full-sized shovel. "This is how the shovel talk goes," he said, before looking stern at his favorite Gryffindor chaser. "Colin, this is a shovel. Do you know what a shovel is used for?" Playing along, Katie grinned before she said, "Digging holes, my lord." Sternly nodding, he said, But not just digging holes, Colin. It's used for burying bodies. Do you understand? With a little awe, Katie silently nodded. Good, he said, because if you make my little sister unhappy, I'll come looking for you. And when I do, I shall be carrying a shovel. And he gave it a little wave. Are we clear? After a couple heartbeats, Astoria screeched, "You wouldn't dare," while Katie blinked for a moment before bursting out with laughter. Harry turned and grinned at Astoria. "Hey, I've been practicing that little talk for ages now. You wouldn't want it to go to waste now, would you?" She glared at him and snapped, "I'm going to marry that boy, Potter, and you better not—" They heard a bit of a boyish yelp from the stairs, interrupting her berating Harry. Turning, they saw Colin standing at the foot of the stairs to the boy's door. "Why, you are?" he squeaked, looking a little pale and frightened. When Tori looked almost horrified at Colin, wondering what to say, Harry grinned before waving the shovel at him and said, "Shovel, Col," before the boy passed out in a dead faint. Tori whirled back on Harry with a look of fury on her face. "This is your fault, Potter," and she snapped her wand into her hand. Harry had a bare moment to say, "Uh-oh," before he dropped the shovel, turned and bolted for the portrait hole. Spells whizzed by him as he ran. At least one stinging hex nailed him right on the left bum cheek as he ran, making him yelp in pain. Katie and a few others broke out into laughter as he practically dived through the hole and made his escape. Bolting along the sixth-floor corridor, he didn't look back until he reached the stairs of the grand staircase. Turning back, he noticed she wasn't chasing him, so slowed down to a jaunty stroll and grinned to himself. As he made his way down to the owner's suites, he whistled a bit of tune. As he passed some of the students, they gave him funny looks. Some even quietly snickered after they passed. No appreciation for whistling talents, he thought. Entering the Gryffindor owner's stairs, he hurried up them and into their study room. The others, except for Tracy and Blaze, were there, working on assignments. They turned to look and, as soon as they saw him, gawked back. Noticing the looks, he frowned back and asked, "What? Is my tie crooked or something?" Susan grinned and said, "Nope, your hair's streaked red and gold." "It looks like you annoyed a Gryffindor," Neville snickered. If I had to guess," he wheezed, "it would be Astoria." Then he broke out into howling laughter. Hermione was snickering away while Luna and the Puffs were grinning at him. Harry frowned and walked into the half-bathroom off the room and checked himself out in the mirror. Sure enough, his hair was indeed streaked red and gold, and was even twinkling. And worst yet, he couldn't dispel the charm. Daphne had to do it when she finally saw him, but not until she laughed herself almost silly. He didn't dare tell her about the shovel talk, though. He knew she'd back her sister.